across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good afternoon to you. Thank you to Ian Collins. Back tomorrow afternoon. The Housewives' Choice is back tomorrow afternoon between 1 and 4. But right now, you lucky, lucky people, back from centre parts. Thank God for that. I didn't break any bones, just most of my resistance to anything. Here we are with drive time between now and 7 o'clock. And as ever, we really, really want you to be involved. We'll tell you how you can be involved in just a tick. The windows are open. The sun is out. It's actually looking quite nice for a change, for a Monday afternoon. So listen, pin back your lugos. Where do we start? James Price in a tick. You'll have heard the news, perhaps. Labour MP Mike Amesbury has been jailed for 10 weeks after admitting punching a man to the ground at his constituency. God knows why he punched him to the ground. Not much detail on that. But he, of course, has been sitting as an independent, had the Labour whip removed, and there now will be, most probably, a by-election. Richard Tice, Deputy Leader of Reform, here in about 40 minutes. My question to him is simple. Surely Reform are going to absolutely concentrate on trying to win that constituency, the Cheshire constituency. It'll be really interesting to see. More on that about Reform coming up. Did the BBC give licence fee money to Hamas? I don't know if you've been hearing about this. There's this horrendous BBC documentary. Everybody knows what I think about the British bloated corporation. Take our money, have a complete, I think, wrong political agenda, and make very damn sure that we all have to put up with how they see things. Kemi Badenoch has stuck her head above the parapet and said she was demanding to know if licence fee cash was given to Hamas, a terrorist organisation, lest we ever forget that, a terrorist organisation. It always begs the question, doesn't it, with the BBC? Are they justifiable in so much of what they do? What do you make of that? 0344 499 1000. Been away a week, the number hasn't changed. Our Jodie's back. Hasn't been anywhere, really. It's just nobody's spoken about it for a week and a half because Peter Cardwell's too into himself to even give credit to the people who work on this show. I'm joking, Peter. You did a great job. But you're gone. Jodie's back, 0344 499 1000. Also, if you want to send a WhatsApp, that's very simple. Do it via Ryan. He likes the voice note, makes him feel important. Slight hangover for Ryan today. He was in the pub till 8 o'clock. God knows why, this morning. 0344 499 1000. And, of course, your text messages. We're delighted to receive them. 87222. So you can talk about the BBC and their money and that documentary. You can talk about Mike Amesbury. You can talk about Ukraine. And I simply say this, and I said it to Ian. I don't really understand what's going on. Is Trump trying to flush out more involvement in Europe? Is he succeeding? What do you make of the Ukrainian situation? If we add into that, by the way, the two favourite stories of the day, that apparently fire people, can't say firemen anymore, that's sexist, fire persons, apparently 2 white and 2 male. OK, I've already said my piece. If my house was on fire, I wouldn't give a fat rat's backside who was driving the fire engine or had the hose in their hand. I just want the fire to go out. That would be my opinion. And also there's a warning today for fat jabs. I'm not sure we can say fat. I think we should say clinically obese people. 82 Brits have died. This is really important. Ozempic and Mounjaro, so many people have had comments to make about this. Do you think it's a good thing or a bad thing? So the BBC, fat jabs, Mike Amesbury punching somebody, Vladimir Zelensky in Ukraine, and fire people who can't be too white. All of that with the legend that is James Price. How are you, sir?
I'm very well. Good to see you here.
It's all a bit frenetic, isn't it, really? Very nice to have you. So you're looking very countrified, if you don't mind me saying. Can I, before we start, So I went to the rugby. Did you go to the rugby on Saturday?
Sadly, I was at a wedding. So
yeah.
I was trying to watch it out of the corner of my eye, but doing
England, Scotland, Calcutta Cup. Richard Tice was at one end of the ground. I was at the other. Very true. Trying to text each other and see each other. Afterwards, did the typical thing. By the way, after Guinness at the rugby, this is the wife. She wants a curry. Proper bloke with the wrong bits, my wife. I'm allowed to say that because she's my wife. In the curry house, sat down very quietly, and this woman went, all right, you're Jeremy Kyle, aren't you? Yeah, I love talk, she said. And her husband said, I don't listen very often, he said, because I make my own chilies, but I do like it. Would you say hello to me? So to Stephen and Sharon, thank you for tuning in. There you are, 6 minutes past 4. Can you do me a favour before we start today? In my absence, 3 years of war, of course, in Ukraine. Vladimir Zelensky saying, if it got us membership of NATO, if it got us the result, if you like, the peace that we all crave, I am prepared to stand aside. A week ago, when I was on holiday, Trump suggested that and was vilified. What is Trump's plan? What is he trying to do? Is he getting it right or wrong, in your opinion, JP?
It is the several $trillion question, I suppose. Look, it's tough always with Trump to know exactly what the end game is, and it is now a truism to focus on what he actually does rather than what he says. I think he understands that perhaps talk is cheap sometimes, and that actually actions are what matter. Having said that, what would the ideal result for the Americans be? It would be for European nation states who have freeloaded and free-ridden on the American security umbrella for decades and decades and decades now to start finally pulling, and I say our own weight. It's not just the French and the Germans or anybody else, the UK as well. We just about, here in the UK, spend the minimum, according to our NATO requirements, on defence. So if you strip out the nuclear deterrent, we don't, and there's all kinds of...
Because we've got to a point where we've always assumed that America would do it for us. So if we strip it back and we say, Donald Trump is saying, my country's skint, we've got a crisis with China coming up, we're giving billions of dollars, it's about time you lot, right, instead of concentrating on diversity and exclusivity, you stood up and you paid for the things that matter. What's wrong with that?
Doesn't seem that unreasonable when put in this cold light today, does it?
No.
It's been years and years, if not decades, but it's been for a lot of the very rich European countries who haven't been doing this. Germany's definitely the worst example of this. Biggest economy in Europe by quite a long way, and they have been just getting easy with Russian gas for years and years and years, Chinese buying all their kit, and then the Americans paying for their security. So it's been easy for them to get rich at everybody else's expense. That can't go on forever. It's mad that anybody ever thought that it could, right? Even aside from the kind of threat of China, which is probably the principal strategic reason, but it also means that we've spaffed more money than we probably should have done on other things,
spaffed,
right?
Spaffed money. Let me read you something. Let me read you something, because I know you were heading into the studio that somebody sent me, and I read to Ian Collins, and he went, this is amazing. The leaders of 500 million Europeans were waiting for 340 million Americans to protect them from 140 Russians who haven't been able to beat 30 million Ukrainians in 3 years. I think that's actually a really interesting quote, isn't it?
It is. And look, you'll note that for all the bad stuff of Donald Trump, Orange Man bad, all that easy criticism...
Orange Man, baby.
There were no major wars started in his time. Under, what would he call him, sleepy, creepy Joe Biden, you had the horrors of happening in Israel. You had even more Chinese aggression. You had Iran sponsoring more of these areas because the American sanctions that Trump put on were released there as well. And, of course, you had this evil, barbaric invasion. Now, would that have happened if Ukraine had been given all the support and funding that it needed? Would that have happened if Europe had got its own house in order, rather than spending huge amounts of money running up massive debts and deficits on things that actually matter about protecting this continent, on loads of drones, on tanks, on planes, on all this kind of stuff? Do you think that Putin would have tried it? The answer is no.
Really interesting. What do you make of the Trump situation, my friends? Come on, time to get involved. 0344 499 1000. That's the telephone number. Send a WhatsApp voice note. We'll get you on between now and 7. It's Drive on Talk. Home of free speech and common sense. Down to you. I love Graham in Bushy. He says, I wouldn't mind if it was Fireman Sam or Fireman Samantha, as long as my house didn't burn down. More of that in a tick. Kemi Badenoch, tell me more about this documentary, this BBC documentary that's caused such outrage. She's called for facts. She wants to know if licence fee cash was given to Hamas terrorists during the making of a controversial BBC documentary. The Tory leader hit out Corporation boss Tim Davie. It was a BBC Two film narrated by the son of a Hamas official. And she's literally gone to town on this. What's your take on this?
Well, she's completely right. I mean, there's always been a lot of BBC bias in these various areas, and I think none more so than a lot of the BBC international work. I think it's actually kind of important that we do have a BBC voice around the world. You're pumping in stuff that's happening into, say, Iran. If you were putting it in Farsi, I think it's worthwhile that we pay for that so that the people of Iran actually know what's going on and that we can influence what's happening in foreign countries. What's actually happening is that the BBC is influencing people here with foreign ideas and things.
Are they still not able or willing to call Hamas a terrorist organisation?
I've certainly not heard them say it at all. Right? And they have just been completely played by this, by the sounds of things. They've lied about what's going on, and the fact is that they know that they're wrong because they have now pulled this show. I would rather they put a warning up top and said, we're going to keep this up, but we acknowledge that we have messed up in all these different ways. And the problem is that it's what I think a psychologist would call motivated reasoning. It's not do I believe this, but can I believe this? And so many of the kind of bleeding heart lefties who make documentary series for the BBC these days just want to believe that the Palestinians are the good guys and the Israelis are all evil and terrible. The truth is obviously much more complicated, but when you look at it from a wider perspective, which one of them is throwing gay people off roofs, which one of them is kidnapping babies, which one of them is raping people, which one of them is holding elections, and which one of them is a thriving democracy democracy with the rule of law. It's easy when you come to it at that point.
What do you make of that, my friends? As well, 0344 499 1000. Did the BBC give licence fee money for that appalling BBC documentary? Was it pro-Hamas? They're still not prepared to call Hamas a terrorist organisation, which is extraordinary. Mike Amesbury, Labour MP, the Cheshire constituency, Runcorn and Helsby. There he was, just doing his job, and then suddenly a few months ago, there was this terrible video where he was seen standing over a man and saying, do you want some more, do you want some more? One doesn't really know what happened. Today, though, Mike Amesbury, who's already lost the Labour whip and is an independent, has been jailed for 10 weeks. The jail sentence means that voters in the constituency can remove the independent MP from his seat with a recall petition, and a by-election will take place. This is right. Should it not be right in Nigel Farage's eyesight, this?
Yeah, I suspect it will be. And I suspect that we'll see in microcosm here. You know, whenever there's a by-election, we try and see broader trends of what's going on. And what will happen, I suspect, is that the Tory vote and the Reform vote will probably almost maybe just about allow a Labour candidate to come back through again, and that will cause all kinds of conversations.
Do you think so? You don't think? You don't think that Reform would win up there?
I think it'll be tight, but you know, what kind of ground game have those guys built up yet? That will be another big question, another early test. You know, they did pretty well this time round, and the way that our voting system works, they got 4 odd million votes and they got 5 seats just about. And I think things will now start changing because they are even more popular. But it does take a level of organisation. You know, even simple, silly things like you've got to get the paperwork in on time and all that kind of stuff.
But what about the impact of what Labour have done for the last 9 months, which has been about as popular as Ryan? I'm joking. I mean, they're massively unpopular. Would that not impact on their vote as well up there?
It definitely will do. It's whether that will be enough on its own to cancel out that kind of Tory reform vote, because the Tories will have to throw everything at this as well. And if the Tories don't do pretty well, then it'll be difficult, and they'll be spinning around all that kind of stuff. That's all fine.
Be interesting, by the way. I read something today. This is, of course, the Cheshire constituency, Runcorn and Helsby. Be really interesting to see whether the Tories actually put, and it's just something I read, one of the big fish in there, Penny Mordaunt. There are rumours that Penny Mordaunt might be asked to challenge for this, but of course she'd probably want one that was safer, wouldn't she?
Oh yeah, I think that's right. And I think that if you put anybody who's been involved in the last Tory administrations, the last few years, it would help reform out even more, actually.
Right, interesting point, yeah.
And what tends to happen inside all these parties is that you call out for people with a local connection. Because if you don't have a local connection at a by-election, it just becomes the parachute story over and over and over again. What we shouldn't lose sight of course, is the fact that a sitting member of Parliament got himself into a situation where he was attacking somebody like this. And I think the judge said that if there hadn't been other people around to pull him away and to stop this
Do we know
attack,
why? Have we any idea?
I don't think we do quite as much yet, but the judge said that he was in such a kind of emotional state of mind that he might have kept going on this.
Wow.
So Labour MP needed to be stopped from harming constituent. There's a broader metaphor in there for the way that Labour are governing the country.
There's something in there, my friend. 0344 499 1000. What do you think of the local MP put in jail for beating up one of his constituents? Now, the one good thing, well, there are many good things about having you on the show. I love having you on the show. You've always been very straight. Britain's fire service, James Price, straight face on this one, is too male and too white, a report today has claimed. The report, which was commissioned by the National Fire Chiefs Council, found that the fire service was institutionally racist, misogynistic and homophobic. It said firemen, or persons, in Britain were not diverse enough because the service proportion of women and ethnic minorities is much less than in wider society. Produced by an advisory group focused on improving diversity, equality and inclusion in the fire service, the report found that 9.3% of firefighters were women and 5.4% only belonged to ethnic minorities. Now, I've made my point. I'll probably be slaughtered. I couldn't give a rat's backside who was driving the fire engine or who was climbing up a ladder or who had a hose in their hand if they could indeed put the fire out in my house. That's all I'm saying.
We better hope there's not a fire here in the studio, right? We're far too male and pale and stale to be able to deal with it,
It's
apparently.
Absolutely not acceptable.
I just want to say to people, look, like, Trump won. Right, I know it's another country, but like there is a, the knock-on effect will happen here. You don't need to do this stuff anymore, right? We haven't got to pretend that the colour of somebody's skin is the most important thing about them anymore. That's what we've had to do for the last few years.
Can I have that conversation with somebody who I respect, actually? Because I never feel like, with you, I feel I can talk about anything, because I'm not. You're much more switched on. We got to a point in this country where people thought that ethnic minorities, different sexual orientations, people were being deliberately quashed and not being given the opportunity, and nobody would want to see that. But is it not surely fair and right to say that we've now got to a point, JP, whereby if you are male and white and 25 and middle class, you're pretty well screwed, aren't you? And that is, I mean, somebody was slagging me off the other day on social media saying, oh, he's talking about, you know, he doesn't understand the difference between where he comes from and other people. But surely it should be on ability. Have we not swung too far in the opposite direction, do you think?
I think we absolutely have. Yeah, I do. And look, again, it's not to downplay the kinds of hurt that people have had in the past, the kinds of times where this stuff used to be the case. But Britain is basically the most tolerant, accepting country in the world. We've got the highest rates of, mixed race marriage in the world, all these kinds of things, and we do it much better than most other people. We've seen, by the way, with more recent arrivals, the difficulties of cultural assimilation and integration, which is a slightly different point, but I think it's broadly relevant that we should talk about. But by and large, we've done a better job at this than anybody else, and yet you would think from this kind of stuff that we've done the worst job. How many people going to school get taught that, for example, the UK was the first country in the history of mankind to actively campaign and fight against slavery?
Abolished it, yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Nobody ever says that.
We spent nearly 50 years doing that before the Americans even had their Civil War about it. Thousands of brave British sailors in the Royal Navy lost their lives. Huge amounts of money was spent to free these people, right? We have a very proud track record of this kind of stuff. We've caught this kind of cold from the Americans, right? They've sneezed on the DEI stuff. We've caught the cold. J.D. Vance came over to Europe and said, look, I know some of it's our fault, but we're stopping it now, so you've got to stop this stuff as well. We just want to move past this. It was Martin Luther King who said we should judge somebody based on the content of their character, not any of these other things. And I think the other problem with it as well is that you've got that Fire Chiefs Council, they've been paid, they'd have paid some kind of consultancy group whose job it is to discover this stuff, right? Because if they said, actually, do you know what, you're fine, you're not a bunch of racists, blah, 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 their business model wouldn't work, right? These grifters need to be rooted out and stopped. And it needs to be stopped everywhere else as well, whether it's in the fire service, whether it's on TV. You look at something like Doctor Who, which is suffering terrible ratings on the
Terrible
BBC.
ratings, about to be axed.
One of the plot lines was that this person managed to save the universe because they were transgender and therefore better and more special than other people, right? There are trans people out there, fine, go on, live your life. If it's for children, different story, we need to have safeguarding, shouldn't be hacking away at children's genitals for some weird fad. People want to do that, fine. But I just think it's incredibly counterproductive to weave this stuff through every single facet of our life to the point that you're worrying about someone turning up to help you save you from a fire if they're there on merit or if they're just there to tick some kind of box. I wouldn't want to be ticking a box if I were black or white or green or anything else.
Completely agree. 03, what do you think, my friends? 0344 499 1000. Text 87222. Final one, fat jabs warning. He says straight across to James Price, right? 82. There's a really serious side to this, though. 82 Brits have died using weight loss and diabetes jabs such as Ozempic and Mounjaro. The official figures from the medicine and healthcare products regulatory industry reveal the toll up to the end of January. The disclosure comes as the Sun reporter paid 280 quid for 4 doses of Mounjaro without any checks. Now, that is the danger. We live in a society where people are bigger, people are concentrated. Actually, we live in a really weird society. I almost feel like Britain's become LA 20 years ago. You're either stick thin or massive. There's obsessive people in the gym who just literally suck fresh air, or people who don't give any sort of concern to their health. The fact of the matter is that these drugs might, in many instances, be beneficial, but I don't think we know enough about the side effects. I don't think we know... Are there enough controls on how to get it, how it's prescribed? Certainly that Sun reporter's piece of work is really, really interesting, because if you can buy it, maybe from the black market, maybe online, what's going to be in that? There's all sorts of things that can go wrong. And there's been many high-profile cases of people that it's impacted negatively on and had long-term effects. Fact.
There are, but at the same time... Obesity is probably one of the biggest problems we've got in this country, and it has huge numbers of spillover
obesity
effects.
has huge effects. You just can't get away with it, but it's a massive problem.
It's a massive problem. Yeah, it is. You saw my next line,
yeah.
Those are, I think, much more serious, right? And they have.
But what about individual responsibility? I'm really
well.
bad on this. I think you and I might disagree on this. I can't have it. No, presumably, it would not be inaccurate to say that the majority of obesity is through overeating.
Yeah, almost certainly.
But people will say he was born big bone. No, he wasn't. No, that's rubbish.
Unless you've got very specific kind of illnesses and thyroid problems and that kind of stuff.
All right, but
right.
That's a small, very small minority.
That is. But the wonderful thing about our society now, in the areas in which we're investing more in science and tech and all this kind of stuff, is that we can make people's lives easier in general.
Yep.
We pasteurise milk. We come up with medicines to stop people dying. You know, for most of human history, people died like at the age of 30 because their teeth fell out and they couldn't eat anymore. Right, things like that.
I'm 60 and my teeth have fallen out.
And so actually having all this wonderful new tech, and these are only the first sort of generation or so of these drugs, and they're going to get a lot better.
But there need to be controls, is what I'm saying, right?
There do need to be controls. But at the same time, again, I think that giving people the choice, let them choose to use these things for a while, okay, go and monitor it, but the potential upside of having a nice, healthier population is great. Millions and millions of Americans are already on this stuff, to the point that aeroplane companies, airlines, are upgrading their profit margins because people are going to cost way less and therefore cost them less in fuel.
This is true.
Oh yeah, and Dunkin' Donuts and people like that,
this.
Profit warnings.
I love it. Jane Price, Jane Price, they called you then. James Price. Yeah, I have heard. Ever so good to have you on. Former Government Special Advisor JP, thank you very much indeed. 4:22. Monday afternoon, this is Talk Drive. JK at the controls till 7. If you want to be on, you know by now, please God, the way to get hold of us. 0344. I say that and there's nobody answering the phone. 0344 499 1000. Text to 87222. And on the way next, really interesting, the Sun's defence editor Jerome Starkey. The latest on Ukraine is on Talk Drive. We're coming back in 3.
You know, Europe is still completely beholden to Vladimir Putin for Russian gas. And we import an awful lot of our gas because we don't produce enough ourselves anymore because of net zero. And now a possible future source of it, and a source which has meant that, you know, gas is, you know, really cheap comparatively in America because of their fracking. We're about to literally fill those wells up with concrete and make them unusable. What on earth are they thinking?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Monday afternoon, 4:25. This is JK on Drive. This is, of course, the home of free speech and common sense, and we love and want your involvement. You can say whatever you want. Listen, just be honest. Tell us what you want to talk about. 0344 499 1000. You might want to talk about Mike Amesbury, the Labour MP, sentenced today to 10 weeks in prison for beating up one of his constituents. That'll be an interesting reform attempt, I would suspect, in a by-election. Richard Tice here before 5 o'clock. Maybe you want to talk about the BBC, that dreadful BBC documentary narrated by the son of a Hamas official. It's a terrorist organisation. That could have been our licence fee that paid for Hamas, which I think should make anybody feel slightly concerned. 0344 499 1000. I did say at the top of the show that the whole Ukraine situation, Volodymyr Zelensky, the pressure from Trump, all those things, really, really confusing to the average man and woman, but certainly not to the defence editor from The Sun. Delighted to have him on this afternoon. Jerome Starkey, how are you, my friend?
Jeremy, very good. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, no, delighted. let's put this, if we can, I'm going to say layman's terms, but you're not allowed to say that anymore, so we'll say layperson's terms. We all know, don't we, that Donald Trump has a certain way of doing business. Some find it uncouth and appalling and repugnant. Others say he actually gets to the heart of the issue. Somebody sent me a text almost immediately I came on air and said, it seems to me that the EU only got their fingers out when Trump had the cojones to face up to the fact that something needed to be done to get this dreadful situation finished. Thoughts on that, Jerome?
Well, it's certainly true that Europe is waking up late to the fact that it needs to spend more and do more for its own defence. And it's not just Europe. You know, the United Kingdom is very much included in that paradigm as well. But it's worth perhaps making the point to your viewer, your listener, that a lot of the reason that Ukraine is still in this fight is partly because aid has been drip-fed and has not potentially not been enough over the course of these 3 years. Of course, Vladimir Putin thought Ukraine would collapse within 3 days. It didn't. It fought very hard and it continues to fight very hard. Towards the end of 2023, Republicans in America blocked a huge tranche of military aid, which Ukraine desperately needed to defend itself. And they did that because they were doing the bidding of Donald Trump. Even though he wasn't in office, he was still effectively their candidate-elect in all but name, hadn't gone through the official processes, but he was cold on Ukraine. And Donald Trump has been cold on Ukraine for some really interesting and apparently acutely personal reasons, which are now appear to be very much to be influencing his foreign policy. But to go back to that question, are the Europeans only now waking up? Part of the reason we are in this situation is of Donald Trump's making from at least 2 years ago.
It's really interesting, actually, and you've just touched upon it. And I mean, I've read, the UK and France coordinate to influence Trump. Trump said things. Zelensky has said, to get NATO membership, to end this war without giving away too much of our land to Russia, to get peace, to save my people. I would even walk away from the presidency. Let's go back to something, Jerome, you just said. Reasons that Donald Trump has always been or has gone cold on Ukraine, because of course he stands accused by many over the last few days and weeks of cozying up to Putin and being soft towards Russia, who of course, and we were covering on talkTV Breakfast with you 3 years ago. This was aggressive. This was a sovereign land being invaded. It seemed led by Boris Johnson. The entirety of Europe was saying this is completely unacceptable. Now we have Donald Trump, the leader of the free world, saying Zelensky's an unelected dictator. What is his beef, do you believe?
Well, let's be very clear. Donald Trump is wrong. President Zelensky is not an unelected dictator. President Zelensky is an elected president. He won his office with over 70% of the vote, a higher percentage than Donald Trump has ever enjoyed. Ukraine has been forced to declare martial law. It has suspended elections in accordance with the Constitution as per martial law. Ukraine did not want to declare martial law. It was forced to declare martial law because Russia launched a full-scale invasion. It's worth noting that the United Kingdom also suspended elections during World War II. This is not an anomalous or an unusual thing to do. If you just begin to... It's perhaps very difficult for people to understand who haven't been here just how hard, in fact, how impossible it would be to have free and fair elections at a time of conflict. Because while some places maintain a semblance of normality, and I'm in Kyiv, I'm speaking to you from Kyiv at the moment, and it is always astonishing how this city has bounced back to life despite the war that is raging in other parts of the country and despite indeed the airstrikes. But we mustn't mistake the veil of normality that we see and feel in places like this. We mustn't let that convince us that the rest of the country is fine as well. Huge swathes of this country resemble the Somme, World War I trench warfare, where men and women are freezing to death in bunkers and trenches, living in constant fear of artillery bombardments and drones. It would be impossible for those people to access polls. If there were concentrations of civilians or soldiers at other polling stations, those would necessarily become potential targets for airstrikes, or at least, there'd be a huge risk of large numbers of people dying if they were gathered. It's just an impossibility. And, as I think The Sun has said, and indeed as many other observers have pointed out, not particularly in keeping with the prestige of Donald Trump's office to throw slanders like that about.
This is my point, because I remember how quickly out of the blocks Boris Johnson, we were working it together, you and I, it was to support Ukraine, flew over there, really sort of got Europe together, provided this, and for a good number of months and years, it seemed that the world was united in the abhorrence of what Putin had done and the support of this incredible man who's brave people. I mean, I read a stat, not even a stat, a comment. I mean, and it might seem quite flippant, but I think it's really, really interesting. It was sent to me yesterday. The leaders of 500 million Europeans, Jerome, are waiting for 340 million Americans to protect them from 140 million Russians who haven't been able to beat 30 million Ukrainians in 3 years, which I think is a very, very interesting point in terms of where we're at. But what I would love somebody to be able to explain to me, and I bet nobody can, is what is Donald Trump thinking here? Because Volodymyr Zelensky, to many people, is a hero, as are the Ukrainian people. We opened our homes. Now, I'm all, actually, I have to say, for Donald Trump getting in his own country and dealing with some of the BS that we see in this country in a very positive way. But what's he trying to achieve on the international stage by calling a man who, before this, was seen as a hero, as an unelected dictator?
Well, I think Donald Trump is trying to achieve two things. He's trying to achieve kudos for himself, and he's trying to do that by honouring the impossible promise that he made during the election campaign to end the war in a day. He's already signally failed to do that. But no one disputes the ideal, the goal of ending this conflict is a good and noble goal, because no sane person who has seen the carnage as I have up close, no sane person who's felt the gnawing fear that this brings, wants this to last 1 second longer than it has to. But how it ends matters. And I think, Jeremy, to get back to your earlier question of why is he doing this, there are many people who suspect that Donald Trump may have a personal vendetta against President Zelensky. John Bolton, who used to work in the White House during Donald Trump's first term, has written about how Donald Trump thought that the Ukrainians hated him, how he was, or thought they'd attacked him, rather. He felt affronted by the Ukrainian bureaucracy, the organization of the state here. That was when President Zelensky was in power. And crucially, you may remember, it was a phone call between Donald Trump and President Zelensky that ultimately led to Donald Trump getting impeached. And it was in that phone call where, by all accounts, Donald Trump tried to bully Zelensky by threatening to withdraw US aid unless Zelensky dished the dirt on the Biden family, on President Biden and his son. So there is reason to believe that Donald Trump may be acting from motives that are perhaps more personal and more immediate to him than grand geostrategy.
I absolutely, and I'm really pleased. I'm always delighted to have you on because you're tip top. But that's a really, really salient point. I will add, though, and I'd love very quickly, final point, I do agree with that text person in that there is no way that this country and Europe should have spent tens of however many years it is relying on America for our security. And if the one good thing that has come out from what he's saying about NATO and defence spending is the United Kingdom certainly needs to spend more on defence, as does Europe. And actually, we shouldn't be dependent on the United States of America, should we?
America is the global behemoth, the global single superpower. I think it's a very legitimate argument to say that we have perhaps got lazy and we've underinvested and we've taken the peace dividend too much since the collapse of the Cold War. It is also worth pointing out that whilst America is the Goliath in the NATO relationship, that actually America's relationship with NATO is deeply symbiotic. It is not simply give, give, give. NATO members represent America, by far America's largest trading bloc. You know, they are America's trading partners. Europe is a huge and important market for America, for everything from F-35 jets to Coca-Cola and clothes. And America also benefits from security by having those alliances. Article 5, the key clause of mutual defence, on which really is the crux of NATO's deterrent, and the reason perhaps we haven't been burnt to a nuclear crisp, has only ever been invoked once in its 75-year history. And it was America who invoked Article 5, and it was America's allies, including the United Kingdom, who came to America's aid in the wake of the 9/11 attacks. America needs alliances, and Donald Trump may learn that to his peril.
It's absolutely delighted. I'm so pleased we had you on, Jerome. Thank you so much as ever. Live in Kyiv there. The Sun's defence editor, Jerome Starkey. Fascinating. 0344 499 1000. What do you make of it? Let's go to London. Georgina, you're on Talk Drive. You got a couple of minutes. What you got?
Hi, Jeremy. Well, I'm absolutely spitting blood at the moment with what Jerome Starkey's been saying about President Trump. The man isn't looking for accolades for what he's doing. He's trying to stop a horrible war and bloodshed and the killing of hundreds of thousands of people on both sides. What we've got to realise is the EU have had 3 years to get the fingers out and help solve this Russian-Ukraine war. It took Donald Trump to come along and take the reins and get the ball rolling for a peace treaty, and now they're all jumping up and down. And
I'm not actually, to be honest with you, I'm not against what you say, but I understand where Jerome's coming from. But there's a better way of doing what I believe, and I said it to Jerome. I think it's fantastic that Trump has basically pointed the finger at Europe and said, you know what, I'm not paying for you anymore. I've got problems with China. I've got problems with my own country. You need to step up and spend less on ridiculous projects and more on defending yourselves. What I don't understand, and I'll put this to you, Georgina, is why, well, maybe we do after what Jerome said, it seems to be personal from Trump's point of view against Zelensky. That's the only thing I was sort of unaware of, to be fair.
Right, listen, it isn't personal. Everyone's saying that Trump is Putin's best friend. Now, this is not the case. What you've got to realise is Putin is a bad man, but he's a powerful man, and all powerful men like the massaged egos. We know Trump loves it. He's a powerful man. He loves people to come along and give him compliments and have his massaged egos. That's what Trump's doing. You know, he has got to softly catch a monkey, basically, with Donald Trump, and that's what he's doing. He's telling him what he wants to hear, that he's going to try and get these two guys round a table and get something to negotiate with. Well, you know, this has been going on since the 1990s, this feud. The war's been going on 3 years, but this actual feud has been going on since the 1990s.
Georgina, I've got to move. You are tremendous. Thank you for coming on. Georgina on Talk Drive, 22 minutes to 5 o'clock. I told you, the Deputy Leader of Reform, Richard Tice, next on this programme. What does he make of the whole Ukraine situation? What does he make of the fact that Mike Amesbury, Labour MP in the Cheshire constituency of, I'll get it right, Runcorn and Helsby, has been jailed today? That means there will be a by-election. That means potentially Reform could become 5 to 6. Are they going to target it? More from Richard Tice next on Talk Drive.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
5, we're live across the UK. Talk Drive is here until 7 o'clock. Thanks so much indeed for tuning in. As ever, if you want to be part of this vain attempt at a programme, 0344 499 1000, text to 87222. Bill from Romsey, JK, Trump wants Putin to keep the land he has taken. He will make the Europeans pay more into NATO, then the war will stop, and then he will rebuild Ukraine and take the minerals out of that country. I guarantee Putin, I don't understand that. Jez, Mike Amesbury is appealing his sentence. He will probably get community service knowing our system and stay as an MP for 4 years. Welcome back, Jez. This is Stuart in Penrith. I object to James Price's statement, not just the Germans, not just the French, because we've always paid our way, and we've always, except Vietnam, been there back in the US, even though that special relationship is a load of old bull. Oh, all right. So the truth about the special relationship is, and it always has been, the Americans shouting jump and the British leadership leadership saying how high. We welcome to the studio the Deputy Leader of Reform UK and MP for Boston and Skegness, who was so in a good place at the rugby on Saturday, in such high quality hospitality, you refused to take my call, or was it the other way round?
It was the other way around, I think, Mr. Kyle, as you well know. But nevertheless, we
Somebody said, somebody called Tice wants to get in. I went, I've never met him. Just
don't know the bloke.
No, what are you talking about?
How stressful was it? Just unbelievable. Absolutely.
I thought we were rubbish, but I thought we won, and that's me
we
being
were.
honest.
And in fairness to the Scots, they played a much better game, and they were.
I was stuck between my wife, who's, as you know,
three-quarters of the game.
Vic is a rugby mad. She's got Guinness. Later on, she had curry. I've got Alice at Edinburgh University, my daughter, in a Scotland scarf, and I'm in the middle of it.
I'm very troubled by that. I think you need to have words with Alice. We're not happy.
Where do you think the word Kyle comes from, then? I am half Scottish.
I'm not happy.
You're not happy about that?
It could be a short interview.
He's changed, ladies and gentlemen. You see, this is what happens. Now, where do you want to can we start with Trump? Because been away for a week with the kids, and I'm a little bit, and I just said it to Jerome Starkey. What is the theory in your mind? Because 3 years ago, Boris Johnson really cajoled almost everybody in Europe to start providing for Ukraine. We opened our homes to Ukraine. I think anybody and everybody thought this amazingly brave man and this country have managed to sustain against a Russian force that probably thought they'd do it in 3 days, right? And actually, 140 million Russians, 30 million Ukrainians, extraordinary. Now, Donald Trump is known as somebody, Richard, that wants to get things done. I get that, right? But does he need to come out and be calling Vladimir Zelensky an unelected dictator? That, to me, doesn't seem the right approach. Thoughts?
We'll take a step back. He won a massive electoral victory, including his statement that he would secure a peace deal in Ukraine. And actually, voters quite like it when politicians do what they say they're going to do. So, look, in that sense, he was quite right to phone up the two key players in this, which is obviously President Zelensky and the monster Putin, and to try and see whether or not some form of peace deal could be arrived at. And
but you've just used... I'm not having a go, but you've just used the word that I agree with, which is monster. So why are you only going to talk to the monster whilst you slag off the person who was and remains, I suspect, quite popular, and call him an unelected dictator? That's what I didn't understand.
Because here's the thing about President Trump. He's not your usual politician or diplomat, right? He is a New York property dealer and trader who's come into the world of politics, and he uses a different language. People should have realised that. People should stop being so naive and be surprised by his use of language. At the end of the day, don't focus on the personalities. Focus on the objective. The objective is a peace deal possible? Question mark. No one knows, but it must be right to try. If you put everything on the table, all the different facets of it, and see whether something can be negotiated. And of course, ultimately, the Ukrainians are the people who will decide, along with their leader and leaders, as to whether or not a peace deal works.
Do you think it was wrong for him not to include Zelensky in those chats?
Well, Zelensky was the second call he made. So after the monster Putin. And at the end of the day, I think that most conflicts and wars end up with some form of negotiation and difficult compromises, however hard it is. And I've used the example before. For example, Northern Ireland. After 25, 30 years of conflict, very difficult compromises were made, including the United Kingdom possibly conceding a referendum as to whether or not Northern Ireland would join the Republic in decades to come. Who knows? Maybe, maybe not. Really difficult, still difficult, but we've had 25 years of peace. Likewise, I've been to Ukraine. I've been to the cemeteries and seen mothers weeping over the graves of their sons. And so I think it must be right to try and put everything on the table, including the critical issue of what are the security guarantees afterwards to ensure that this never happens again. What happens?
I understand that Trump doesn't care what people think. I'm just interested.
And frankly, people here have got to stop being so ridiculously sensitive about the words that he uses.
Okay, no, good point. And
take the man seriously. Don't take every single word literally. I think it's a very, sensible way to approach it.
It's very.
This thing about the money is really important because Trump's a dealer, so he's focusing on the very valuable minerals in Ukraine. The most valuable, of course, of which are in the most eastern part, currently controlled by Russia. And then there's the issue of $300 billion of Russian state assets, cash basically, and various other assets, held primarily in European central banks, that the European leaders are being a bit queasy about actually taking control of and using, either to repay some of our loans and money and or to invest in Ukraine's future defence and rebuilding Ukraine. All of this stuff should be on the table. Negotiations likely to take some time. Who knows? I just come back, and I've taken a lot of flack in the last week, including from other presenters on this wonderful channel. I just think that it must be right to try for peace.
No, I don't disagree.
And I repeat this. I really want to repeat this point. Most conflicts and wars end up in some difficult negotiation. But it must be right to try.
No, I'm not disagreeing with that. And for me, listen, if he comes up with a result, it just to me seemed quite strange for somebody who was internationally and globally smiled upon for everything he's done to be labelled an unelected dictator, which is fundamentally untrue. We know whether
we know that.
People get. But here's an interesting thing: the one good thing that has come out of this, in my humble opinion, is something that should have happened many bloody years ago, which is and listen to this. This started as this was sent to me. The leaders of 500 million Europeans are waiting for 340 million Americans to protect them from 140 million Russians who haven't been able to win against 30 million Ukrainians in 3 years. The one thing that Donald Trump has managed to do is to get the EU to get its head out of his backside and this country and go, do you know what, 2.5% of GDP, it is not enough for our defence. And by the way, this is, and I will say this is not Starmer. This is the Tory. This started with Cameron. Our defences in this country are a disgrace, Richard. They are an absolute disgrace.
And that's the reason I first left the Conservative Party back in 2012, because of the appalling strategic defence review that the Conservatives rushed through just after they were elected.
Easy
in
money
2010.
to save. Easy money to save. When you're relying on America.
At the end of the day, look, you've just raised the point about 450 million European citizens. If the European leaders, including ourselves, don't like the American proposal, then, hey, guess what? Let's put a different proposal forward. That involves a whole load of money and a whole load of kit. Well, I can tell you where the money is. That's the 300 billion of Russian money, right? Why don't we use that, $300 billion? And have we got the kit? Well, there's a big question that no one really wants to talk about. I mean, the Germans had a few helmets, which they offered at the beginning of the war. Let's just remember that. So, look, we're basically... not unreasonably, NATO should always be our overriding security, defensive alliance and blanket. But we've all got to pay our bills. And it's not fair for America to constantly stump up way more than everybody else. And so if we want a seat at the table, frankly, it may be uncomfortable, it may be difficult, but guess what? Money talks.
Richard Tice is going absolutely nowhere. I'm not letting him. Lock the door. I'll be back after this break. Don't go anywhere.
You know, Europe is still completely beholden to Vladimir Putin for Russian gas. And we import an awful lot of our gas because we don't produce enough ourselves anymore because of net zero. And now a possible future source of it, and a source which has meant that, you know, gas is really cheap comparatively in America because of their fracking. We're about to literally fill those wells up with concrete and make them unusable. What on earth are they thinking?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Back 8 minutes to 5, Talk Drive, live across the UK. Richard Tice, Deputy Leader of Reform, and MP for Boston and Skegness. He was at the rugby, he was in far worse seats than me, but no problem. So you see, when you get into government, you'll be in the royal box.
Well, let's wait and see. No, man of the people, me.
Won't be texting me then, will you? Please let me come in. 0344 499 1000. Right, the other big news story of the day, and I'm interested from a reform point of view. Mike Amesbury, MP for Runcorn and Helsby, today sentenced to 10 weeks in prison. He admitted punching a man to the ground on a night out. Unbelievable footage. Today sentenced. He's already lost the whip. He's an independent. This could result in a recall petition amongst constituents, and there could be a by-election. However, he has appealed, but I presume that Reform will be going all out in that constituency. Yes or no?
As and when it's called, we will be going all out. I think it's still a bit unclear given the timing of the appeal. I think he has gone straight to jail, is what I understand, but it's still a bit unclear. So let's wait and see. But when the by-election happens, we'll have a great candidate for sure, and we will be working very hard, and our ambition will be to win that and for that to become our 6th Member of Parliament.
James Price said the issue is that far north is that there will be the Tories and Reform could cancel out each other and Labour could sneak through the back door, to which I said, and maybe I'm missing the point, that I do think you should take into consideration what the traditional Labour voters think of the mess that Starmer's made for the last 9 months.
Look, I think it's all up for grabs, but I don't think there's going to be any love for the Tories who voters have just kicked out. And I don't think there's any love for a Labour Party that, frankly, is running the country into the ground. So it will be very interesting indeed.
Do you feel the momentum, excuse the pun,
without question,
is with Reform?
Without question. I mean, we're topping most opinion polls in the high 20s as we speak. The Tories are sort of sinking towards 2021. That sort of order, 22, and Labour's sort of somewhere in the mid-20s.
Kemi Badenoch came out.
Anything could happen. It will be very interesting.
I said before I went away that I heard very little from Kemi Badenoch, and I'm just being really honest. Everybody knows that I voted for Reform, but I'm to be convinced. Kemi Badenoch demanded yesterday to know if licence fee cash was given by the BBC to Hamas terrorists during the making of that controversial BBC Two documentary. I don't know if you saw it last week. It was narrated by the son of Hamas official. This is the BBC that still won't call Hamas a bloody terrorist organisation. But maybe I'm missing the point, and maybe I'm saying the wrong thing. Is she cutting through, Kemi Badenoch? Is it resonating?
Credit where credit's due. We've been very critical of her, but she's quite right to ask that question.
OK, good.
And the BBC should answer it, because clearly there's a sort of independent production company that originally the BBC said they had full editorial control of the programme. Then when things got a bit hot and tense, all of a sudden, no, nothing to do with us, Gov.
I know that. Yeah, I know that one. Let's screw the production company. Yeah,
you've been there, done that, Jeremy.
Yeah.
And so
nothing to do. We commissioned it, but it's nothing to do with us at all. It's everything fine.
But look, in all seriousness, this was an appalling,
dreadful
breach of standards.
I think they're a disgrace.
And I've been very, very critical of the whole, all the issues around Hamas, around UNRWA, around the BBC, their refusal to call Hamas a monstrous terrorist organisation, which they are. It's not difficult, this stuff, and they've got serious questions to answer. And I think people are sick and tired of hearing, oh, we're going to have an inquiry and lessons will be learned.
I'll tell you something. I would never tell you how to do politics, but if reform ever got near number 10, you've talked about the blob, I would absolutely get rid of the BBC licence fee in a heartbeat. I think it's a disgrace. I think it should be on quality and it should be on choice. I think they are, honestly, and I'll never work for them, I think they're a disgrace.
They really are, and they keep letting themselves down.
Yeah, they do.
And they keep saying we're going to learn lessons, and then they never do. Maybe fire a few people.
Yeah, good idea.
Get rid of a few people, and then people might start to perform better.
Well, you've got 3 minutes and 2 subjects: fire service or Nigel Farage. What do you want first?
Both.
All right. Nigel Farage has joined the fire service. No, he hasn't. Britain's fire service is 2 male and 2 white, a reporters claim. The report commissioned by the National Fire Chiefs Council found that the service was institutionally racist, misogynistic and homophobic. And Richard Tice, with his head in his hands, I said at the beginning of the show, forgive me, I said I wouldn't give a fat rat's backside who was driving the train, what's it called? Honestly, truck when your house is on fire.
The real point is they should not be wasting time and resources and money on these ridiculous reports. Just train your good, brave fire officers to do their job brilliantly, rapidly, in order to save lives. And I'll say it bluntly now, if they'd done their job properly at Grenfell, dozens and dozens and dozens of people would still be alive.
Mate, honestly, fantastic that you actually got to say that, because honestly, we are in a and this is why Trump won in America, because we're in a country that is spending money on commissioning reports and telling me that the fire service is institutionally racist, misogynistic and homophobic. Ridiculous, like the police service. Cure crimes, right? Put fires out. Stop arguing the toss. Last week when I was away, apparently Nigel Farage gave up ownership at Reform UK to make the party more demographic. Was that the two of you decided that? What difference does it make? Explain that to the viewers and the listeners.
So we committed on July the 5th last year, straight after the election. Nigel confirmed that we would democratise the party. So instead of being owned by 3 or 4 individuals, Nigel is the majority shareholder, it would become owned by the membership.
Right.
It was the constitution. The new one was signed off in the September conference we had, and it's gone through the legal process, and now it's actually happened, and it was all confirmed last week, and it gets...
So you and he had a share in...
We had shares in it.
Did you get any money for those shares?
No, none at all.
Oh, I'd be quite gutted. I mean, if it created reform and it might end up as the elected government, I'd want some dosh.
Maybe a pint of Guinness Zero or something, who knows?
Yes.
But in all seriousness, the key point is we have... the democratisation has happened.
Yep.
And so that's, in a sense, part of the maturing, professionalising of the party that Nigel as leader promised to do, and he's delivered on that promise with the chairman, Zia, who's done a brilliant job getting this through. It takes time.
Of course.
And just has to be sorted. I think most people will say 6-7 months, we've got it sorted, next job, move on.
I think it's also very important. I know Ben Habib as a voice is saying, we should democratise this party, and you've proven that. And also, I think the point that you made earlier was you got 5 MPs in the last election. It wasn't organised, this party at all. It wasn't democratised. It was a private-owned organisation with very few... it's going to be a different machine in 4 years' time.
I always said the job was, because we had very limited resources, most of the money, bluntly, I'd put in. The point was that I said we were going to stand over 600 MPs, and we achieved that. Of course, it was a bit bumpy. Of course, it was difficult. And running political parties is really, really hard. Running it with the square root of not a lot is even harder. But we made great progress. We've got the bridgehead, and let's see what happens, and on we go.
And all that money you lost, I'll buy you your next ticket to Italy in 2 weeks' time at the rugby if you want. Richard Tice, Deputy Leader Reform, thank you so much indeed, and good luck with everything. Thank you for your input. And listen, thank you for listening. That's an hour down, 2 to go. What do you make of the main news stories of the day? Whatever you want to talk about. Mike Ainsbury, Ukraine, reform. Maybe you want to talk about the fire service. 0344 499 1000. That's the only number you need. You can text on 87222. Start your message with the word talk, and the news at 5 is next on Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Second hour of Drive for Monday afternoon. Hope of free speech and common sense. So good to be back on air. We are here until 7 o'clock, and as ever on this show, what do you want to talk about? It's your show. My God, there is so much going on. Labour MP Mike Amesbury jailed earlier this afternoon for 10 weeks for beating up a constituents. That'll do it. In his own constituency, he faces losing his seat. He's gone to jail. He is appealing, but it looks like there will be a by-election. We just spoke to Richard Tice in the studio for half an hour. Reform all out on that one if it happens. Cammy Badenoch sticks her head above the parapet and quite rightly slags off the BBC and wants to know whether our licence fee cash was used to pay a BBC narrator, the son of a Hamas official, a dreadful documentary. What do you make of your money being spent on that? Maybe you think that we should talk about fat jabs. This is a terrible story. 82 Brits have died after using weight loss and diabetes jabs such as Ozempic and Mounjaro. Are there enough controls? Is it something you do? Is it something you find abhorrent? But the big news story of the day is surely this, ladies and gentlemen. Britain's fire services, too male and too white, reporters claimed. Apparently, the fire service is institutionally racist. It's misogynistic and it's homophobic. I myself am already in trouble because I said I couldn't give a fat rat's backside. Who was driving the truck or holding my or their own hose? When my house was on fire, I couldn't give a stuff. I just want my house to be put out. Let's go to the phone lines. It's a new caller. North of Watford Gap. It exists, by the way, London, just so you're aware. In Manchester, Sharon, you're on Talk Drive. Good evening. How are you?
Good evening, Jeremy. I love your show. It's brilliant. Fantastic.
Did we pay you to say that?
No, it wasn't actually. No, it wasn't. No.
Anyway, how's Manchester? I bet you it's raining.
No, it's beautiful. It's sunny and everything.
Good
Lovely
God.
warm.
Do you know when I first went to Manchester, nobody told me it was in a valley, and for the first 62 days it rained every day and I was that depressed. Anyway, Shaz, what you got?
Right, what I'm going to say to you is I'm annoyed about this fire service, about fire people and fire person, and you'll never believe what happened to me today. I went down to a local bakery in Ashton-under-Lyne.
Very posh Ashton-under-Lyne.
And yes, and I asked for a gingerbread man. And he said, no, you can't. He said, it's a gingerbread person.
Oh, God, please.
Did you what?
Are you taking the mickey out of me?
I said, are you taking mickey? He said, no, it's a gingerbread person. I said, look, just give me a gingerbread man now. And
right, I'm giving up. That's it. I can't take any more. Is that a true story?
It's a true story, honestly. He said to me he couldn't serve me a gingerbread man. It had to be a gingerbread person.
There is not another radio station or television online network that will allow somebody to come on and say something that truthful and that honest. Sharon in Manchester is just telling us, ladies and gentlemen, she went to a bloody cake shop and asked for a gingerbread man. That apparently is sexist and misogynistic and probably homophobic because it should have been a transgender gingerbread person. Probably, I have no idea where the whole thing. What is wrong with this country, Shaz? Seriously?
I do not know. And I said to him, you can stick it up your backside for me.
Did you?
Well, stick it up your...
What, the gingerbread man or just the attitude? Love having you on, Shaz. Don't go anywhere. We'll speak to you soon. Thank you very much indeed. Let's go to Newcastle, best city in the land. Leslie, you're on Talk Drive. Good afternoon. How are you?
Hi, good afternoon. I'm fine, thank you.
Gingerbread men. You can't.
I don't get me started on the whole blooming lot of it. The fire service.
Yes.
This diversity, inclusion, all of this. Bearing in mind that ethnics make up 18% of the population, am I stupid in thinking, how do the maths math?
Am I stupid in thinking that? Listen, I'm all for.
No,
I have to say, I have to say, and I would never. And I freely accept that there might have been many instances before where there were not opportunities given, but probably because of my age and my view. I think we've gone the other way. I think we're completely getting to a point where, how do I put this without getting into trouble? Well, all right, I'll say it, that if you're white and middle class, you're probably at the back of the bleeding queue now.
Well, where we are, I'm not actually in Newcastle, I'm just up from Newcastle.
Where are you?
Few. I'm in Berwick-upon-Tweed.
Oh, do you know, can I just tell you something? You see, just think I don't know these things. The train through Berwick-on-Tweed to Scotland is the most extraordinarily beautiful journey you could ever do. Mm-hmm. It's true, isn't it?
It is, it's beautiful. But there's not many ethnic people in Berwick-upon-Tweed, so what do they do? I'm sorry, we can't have a fire service. It just doesn't matter. And then you've got to factor in, if those 18% want to do all of the...
It's also... Is it not also this desire to... You know, this diversity exclusive and all that, I don't even know how to say it. I sort of want... I want child rapists to be caught. I want old ladies who have been mugged in the street to get justice, and shopkeepers who have spent their lives building a business and have it ransacked and the police don't turn up. We seem to be getting our priorities wrong. That's all I'm saying. Listen, Leslie, great to have you on. Berwick on Tweed, what a fantastic place. Thanks for making it talk. Keep it on. 0344 499 1000. There's only one person, by the way, on a Monday at 5 o'clock. When you think about all of the madness of the world, if I ever feel like I'm hyperventilating, I bring myself a degree of calmness by introducing the assistant comment editor of The Telegraph, a wonderful, wonderful mate. Poppy Coburn, good afternoon. How are you?
Hello, how are you?
I'm all right, mate. I'm just going to try really hard not to lose it. I've been away. I'm slightly stressed because I took the kids to Centre Parks, which is quite possibly the worst experience of my life. What a horrific experience.
So you're financially ruined already?
Well, it's not just the money. I had to one of those bloody cycles where... Do you remember last the summer one? And it had like a little caravan at the back, which was canvas. And my children just sit in it, and I'm trying to go up a hill like that. Great, knackered. Come back to work for a rest. Anyway, Pops, where do you want to start? Do you want to start with Trump and Ukraine, or Mike Amesbury, who decided it would be a good idea as an MP to punch his constituents in the face? What would you like to start with?
Oh, we've got to start with the punching story, surely. It's the funniest one of the day.
I mean, he's been jailed today for 10 weeks. He'd lost the Labour whip. So, in essence, by going to jail, there could be a recall petition. There could be a by-election. We just had Richard Tice, Deputy to Reform, in the studio. He said that this man, Amesbury, has appealed and this could kick the can down the road. What's the latest?
I found it very interesting, if you actually read the judge's report in this case, that they're very clear that they're saying to people of the local constituency that they don't want him to come back. They want him to be in jail in case the local constituents would somehow be so keen to re-elect the man who has just decked his constituent. Yeah.
Sorry you didn't vote for me. I'm going to smash your face in, but the rest of you just keep voting for me.
I don't think the British people are actually that stupid to want a man who thinks it's acceptable to punch people in the face for disagreeing with him. But, you know, it's a strange world we live in. I mean, you know, Richard Tice, he is the person, his party are the people who could potentially be winning the seat. I mean, they only got, I think, 7,000 votes in the last election, but look how things change, you know.
Well, it's really interesting because James Price said to me, he said, I think that Labour might sneak again because the Tories and Reform might cancel each other out. But I think there is still on the streets, don't know what you think of this, real apathy towards what the Tories are even attempting to do because of... I think they're going to suffer for a while longer because of 14 years. And I also think there's a great deal of anger amongst Labour voters about what Starmer's done in 9 months.
I think both is completely accurate. I think people are still furious at the Tories for the last 14 years. They're not exactly thrilled by Kemi Badenoch, who apparently is not really working particularly hard, you know, although you'd have to be working every hour God gives you to improve the reputation of that party.
She doesn't seem to have ignited, Poppy, does she? There's nothing that... I mean, I know she came out today and demanded to know whether licensed players' cash was used to fund that, you know, nice Hamas documentary the British bloated corporation decided to put on last week. But again, I don't know. Maybe because we're closer here and we know Nigel and we know Richard, it doesn't seem to be a vibe around the Tory party right now, does there?
It's also, you know, people who live in real Britain who actually have to see the state that the country is in every day. I think if anyone, you know, anyone who was Conservative leader, going to people with a straight face and saying we have the solution to the problems that we have caused, you're just not going to believe them. That's the problem. There's no trust anymore. And so Reform, what they really benefit from is for saying, we're not those guys, we're not the Tories, and we're not the other people who are currently running this country into the ground either. And by virtue of being not those two parties, I think the possibility of them winning is actually pretty high.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think they need to get somebody local, but I think that should be an absolute, for Reform, something if Amesbury is quite rightly kicked out. I think they should absolutely focus on that. Let's go back to actually what Kemi Badenoch stuck her head above the parapet around. This was a BBC documentary. Have you seen this? I was away, so I didn't, but it basically was a BBC Two film narrated by the son of a Hamas official. Now, I'm slightly concerned that the British Broadcasting Corporation, which is supposed to be the unbiased voice of the British people, still fails to call Hamas a terrorist organisation and is blatantly biased in so many different ways.
Yeah.
I mean, what's the Telegraph? I mean, I think they're a disgrace to people. I said it for too long. It's unbelievable to me.
Well, I think, you know, let's not forget how much money has the BBC spent in the last 5 years on their big BBC Verify disinformation unit. Now, they should never be allowed to make mistakes like this. This is not a small little, you know, whoops, I'll put my hands up. You know, this is potentially giving taxpayers money to a prescribed terrorist organisation. And yet they're constantly lecturing everyone else in the media, everyone on social media. You're now posting something on Facebook. You know, you're not allowed to say that. That's not true. And yet the BBC, the British Broadcasting Corporation, you know, supposedly where all the truth in the country is coming from, they're doing stuff like this. I mean, I'm glad that Kemi Badenoch's bringing it up in Parliament, but also it's just like, what are the people the company thinking?
I was laughing with Tice just now. I was saying if I was Prime Minister, the first three things I'd do, I'd literally halve the blob. I would literally get rid of the licence fee overnight, and I would double our spend on defence. And I don't get over. I don't understand how this is supposed to be a state broadcaster. People will say, "Oh yeah, but talks to the right." It is right, and you make that choice. But why we should pay £170 for something that is so blatantly biased in a certain direction? It should be choice.
Exactly. You know, my lefty sister, you know, she doesn't agree with the things I do, but she doesn't have to buy the paper in the morning. You know,
but there you are. You have to buy the Telegraph. Yeah, you have to buy the Telegraph, or you have to choose Talk. I get my bill the other day. Really hacked me off, actually. I get my bill for the licence fee. I'm not going to break the law. I'm going to pay it. That's the way it is. But I really object to it because I don't watch it. It really annoys me. I think it's a monopoly that needs to end. I really do.
Absolutely, and it's not just the left-right thing. I think we can all be able to get together and say that Hamas is a terrorist organisation that kills little kids. So no one should be giving them a platform. You know, that's common sense. This is ridiculous.
Common sense. There you go. Talking about common sense. Somebody used that mantra, got elected as the 47th President of the United States. I freely admit, I've been away for a week, and I'd love your take on this, Poppy, because I was really and am very supportive of Trump's weeding out this huge amount of misspend on ridiculous things and people having jobs and diversity exclusion, all those sorts of things. I understand that he stood, as Richard Tice said, on a ticket of "I will sort out Ukraine." But I'm failing to understand why he's taking direct aim at a man who 3 years ago was being, you know, feted as one of the greatest men of all time. Vladimir Zelensky standing up to Russia. We opened our homes. He did win an election. That's a complete bad mistake by Trump. But what is he attempting in your mind to do with these words?
So I think we have to understand the psychology of Trump here. You know, it goes without saying, Zelensky is a war hero. You know, Churchill also put elections off during World War II. And I don't think anyone with half a brain would say that he was a dictator. But for Trump, he has legitimate concerns about how the war in Ukraine has been carried out, which is that Europe hasn't been paying its way, which is true, that America has been footing the bill for the war and giving them too many arms, too much cash, which I think is also a fair thing to say.
Yep.
But these personal attacks against Zelensky, I think it's as simple as when Zelensky was trying to get the US aid he needed to defend his country, he was talking to Democrats. And for Trump, the moment you speak to Democrats, the moment you are like up there on the screen at the Oscars appealing to the Hollywood elite and asking for money for your country, to save lives, by the way, he thinks that's a personal attack on him. So I don't think there's any way of justifying this, but I think internally in Trump's mind, he goes, Zelensky, you support all the people that I don't like, my political enemies, you know, so you need the money, I'm not going to be there for you.
It's interesting, though, the one thing that Donald Trump has done, and many people have texted and said this already, he's actually managed to focus Britain and Europe's mind into spending more money. I read this to everybody today, it was just something sent through to me. The leaders of 500 million Europeans are waiting for 340 million Americans to protect them from 140 million Russians who haven't been able to beat 30 million Ukrainians in 3 years. And I think, and I'm British, I think Donald Trump is absolutely right. And this is not, by the way, and I'm going to say this is absolutely nothing to do with Keir Starmer. This goes back to Cameron. For too long, this country has put aside spending money on defence. It's an easy cut, it doesn't matter. And it's come back and bitten us on the backside. And I think it's a disgrace that this country doesn't spend more on defence by a mile.
And actually, let's actually go to our politicians who are saying they're going to be there for Ukraine and go, what is the operational capacity of the British military right now? We have 80,000 standing soldiers. If we're using a peacekeeping force, how many of those soldiers are going to be out there? How much of equipment do we have? How much of it actually works? How much of the equipment can we actually man? You know, when the money runs out, where's it going to come from in the economy? These are the sorts of hard questions which have real answers that are not being asked at the moment of the government, and they need to be asked because Europe is at war. We should have realised this when Russia invaded all those years ago. We are still having a ground war in Europe. If this does not wake us up, nothing will.
Very often we get voice notes. Is this one funny and good? Am I paying it to Poppy Coburn? Is it good? Right, we're playing this to you, Poppy. This is Kevin on the BBC. Go.
As a law-abiding citizen who pays every tax going, if it is found that the BBC has paid my licence fee money, which I do begrudge paying, I will instantly be stopping that payment and sod the consequences. I'm absolutely sick of the BBC. The conversation has been one-sided throughout this so-called war. Hamas need to be obliterated, and yet the BBC won't even call them a terrorist organisation.
This is what I mean, Poppy. I don't believe that sane people don't agree with Kevin absolutely 1,000,000% across this country. Don't get it.
100%. It's not just this one thing as well. It's not calling them terrorists. It's playing the video of them parading in front of the coffins of little children that have been killed while hostages under their supposed care and doing neutral commentary about it. You should be able to say evil is evil. And if the BBC can't do that, then they should just shut the entire organisation down because they can't do news.
Completely agree. Now, I know that you won't need a trigger warning on this because you will be even more outspoken than me. Today, a report has proven, or rather not proven, has said that Britain's fire service, Poppy Coburn, is too male and too white. The report, which was commissioned by the National Fire Chiefs Council, found that the fire service was, and I quote, institutionally racist, misogynistic and homophobic. Of course, this is JK on Drive. That's the thing that I'm concentrating on today. I said I couldn't give a bat. Anyway, I couldn't give anything if my house is on fire. Who's driving the truck? I mean, what? Honestly, mate, where have we got to where it seems now that anybody who is, I don't know, I'm going to say it, if you're white and middle class and 25, you're screwed, aren't you?
You know what? I can give you a real example of a place that's just as crazy as we are, who did the same thing. California, Los Angeles. You know, they had those bits of wildfires.
Yeah,
just before the wildfires that killed nearly 100 people. Have got how many people have lost their homes, lost their entire livelihoods. The head of the LA firefighting force, said that the fire service is not diverse enough and there are too many white men. Yes. Then a couple of weeks later, what happens? There are real consequences for this stuff. It's easy to laugh because it's ridiculous. But actually, if your house is burning down, you want the person who's the bravest, who's the most qualified, not someone who makes you feel all warm and fuzzy inside because you're being represented. Because no one's being represented if they're burned to a crisp. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
That's my point. I'm not... And I'm sure there were plenty of examples, you'd admit this, in the past where that might have been the case. But to me, we've gone so far the other way now that it's become a dangerous obsession, hasn't it?
It is dangerous. It's like we're asking for our surgeons, our train drivers, our pilots. They all have to be representative. No, these are people who make life and death split decisions. They have to be the best people for the job. I don't care. As a woman, I don't care if they're all men. It doesn't bother me at all. Why would it? I've got plenty of opportunities elsewhere. The point is that the job is done by the most qualified person to do the job. That is simple as that.
I cannot tell you how much I love having you on. We know how busy you are and we know how difficult it is, but we love having you on and we really appreciate it. Poppy Coburn, thank you so much indeed. Assistant comment editor of the Daily Telegraph. Hopefully, fingers crossed, back next week, 5:21. We're live across the United Kingdom. The lights are very weird today. Look at this. Look, if you go right forward like that, look like I'm in a shroud. 0344 499 1000. Jodie is taking the call, still gutted and should be that Everton didn't have that penalty decision upheld. They should have beaten Manchester United, the useless manager. That was an absolute disgraceful decision, and I have to say, as an ex-West Ham fan, as a West Ham fan, our manager that we let go, what an amazing job he's done at Everton. Sport this hour with a man who will tell you I created his television and radio career, Ian Danter, all those years ago in Birmingham. We're also going to talk more about the BBC and take your calls on 0344 499 1000. More voice notes as well. We're coming back in 3.
You know, Europe is still completely beholden to Vladimir Putin for Russian gas. And we import an awful lot of our gas because we don't produce enough ourselves anymore because of net zero. And now a possible future source of it, and a source which has meant that, you know, gas is, you know, really cheap comparatively in America because of their fracking. We're about to literally fill those wells up with concrete and make them unusable. What on earth are they thinking?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
5:25, this is JK on Drive, live across the United Kingdom on Talk, the home of free speech and common sense. Please be involved. 0344. Did that sound desperate? 0344 499 1000. You can ring and speak to our Judy. Cameron's got a cold, the boyfriend who hasn't asked her to marry him yet. He's got a cold, and in typical Scouse bird, I'm allowed to say that because she allows that with mates, in Scouse lady style, she's like, just get on with it. Stop snivelling, for God's sake. If I told you what she said to Ryan and I, what she has to go through on a daily, I should say monthly basis, she'd fall off your chair. 0344 499 1000, text to 87222. Listen, Talk. No name. I'm an ex-firefighter and I can assure you that racism does not exist in the service. When I first applied, I was told they had to recruit percentages of different races and sexualities. Hello to Bill. We don't need fat jabs. What we need is willpower. That would be a jab, wouldn't it? Yes, good. Elliot from Guildford. Hello, Elliot from Guildford. It's posh there. People get out. Never mind. Elliot, I'm a white 26-year-old male and recently applied to join the fire service. It's actually a dream of mine since I was a child, off the back of watching Fireman Sam. You can't say Fireman Sam. It's going to be renamed Fire Person Sam. Does this now mean I won't be given a fair chance when it comes to a vacant position? Maybe. Good Lord. I think that... Oh, no. Let's go to the phone lines. Let's go to... I'm going to have to get glasses round. Have you noticed what... I've started to go like this. Bolton, Mark, home of Peter Kay. How are you, Marky Mark?
How you doing, Jez?
Not bad.
To see you back, mate.
Thank you, my friend. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad, thanks.
What do you want to say?
Basically, all this about the fire brigade.
Yes.
To be fair, I don't care if it's a black lesbian with pink hair, green eyelashes, red fingernails. I don't care. I don't care. Male, female.
Just want fire put out, Jez. Put bloody fire out. Stop worrying about who's got oars. Put fire out, right?
That's it. That's common sense, isn't it? Surely you don't need to make a report about it. To be diverse in a job like that, I mean, should look at firefighters. They're all big lads. You know.
Well, now I'm going to read something. I'm going to keep you on the line here, and this is where Jodie will probably punch me. She'll probably come into the studio and punch me in the face. Tim says, diversity, what a load of old tosh. Ability and skill only. I'm a veteran firefighter, and my first test was to lift a 15-stone dummy off the floor. Margot says, and this is also very interesting, read your news about firefighters. My son is a firefighter, and he tells me that the fire service has tried their best to recruit ethnicities and females. The service has had to pay out considerable compensation. This is from a woman, before you jump on me, with regard to female firefighters recently complaining that they shouldn't be expected to lift such heavy weights. Mark?
Well, that's pretty ridiculous, really. I mean,
I just think we seem to have got to a point where we're so busy trying to tick so many boxes that we miss the point of so much. Mark in Bolton, thank you very much indeed. Keep calls coming. We'll get you on 0344 499 1000. This is all to do with the fact that the fire service has today been called institutionally racist, misogynistic and homophobic. I don't know. 0344 499 1000. And my next guest, and let's go back to a bit of BBC bashing. I do like to bash the BBC. I said the BBC, Amy. Don't start looking at me like that. There wasn't a mention of anything other than the BBC when I talked about bashing. A former BBC executive, host of the Bee Watch podcast. I fear we might disagree. Roger Bolton, good afternoon, sir. Welcome to Talk Drive. How are you?
Very well. By the way, I don't speak for the BBC. They got rid of me twice, so I'm not speaking for them. But I do want to defend them against some of the prejudice and bias that you've exhibited.
Wow! You haven't even let me start. Prejudice and bias, me old son. Hold on a minute.
I've been listening to you, admiring your force of argument and
all right, let's look at the facts. OK? And I'm not a fan of hers. And let me ask you a question that I know, however much the BBC, with its politically correct approach, believes is correct, millions, Roger, millions of people in this country think is abhorrent, that the people who got rid of you twice, and yes, we'll do a balanced interview here, still refuse to call Hamas, who raped, murdered and pillaged in a most disgusting way and have created so many problems in the world, they will not call them a terrorist organisation. Surely you understand that many people find that disgusting.
I do understand that, and clearly Hamas have committed terrorist acts, and I have no problem calling them terrorists. But the BBC should simply report what people do, and they should show how appalling Hamas is and what they've done. And I believe they do that.
Do you? Did you see that documentary?
Yes, I have, as it happens. And, the fundamental problem here that people need to understand is Israel will not allow any independent journalist into Gaza.
Oh, you're blaming Israel now?
No, I'm just saying that they don't. Now, why don't they let them in? The problem with documentaries like this, and they have to be made using people already in Gaza, because Israel government will not allow independent journalists into Gaza.
So the BBC's answer to this is to make a BBC Two film, as I understand. I haven't watched it, be honest with you there, Rog, narrated by the son of a Hamas official. So I put it back to you again. How do you expect millions of people in this country who have seen what Hamas have done, how do you expect them, probably, by the way, they've already got an issue with paying 170 quid for an organisation that is biased. And by the way, I'll answer what you're going to say to me.
Hold on. There are so many questions there. Come on. You asked me one question. Let me try and answer.
How do you expect people to handle that?
No, let me answer this question. The BBC has to try and report what is happening. In Gaza, it can't get independent journalists in. So it's done the best it can using cameramen there. It's also made documentaries and transmitted them about the atrocities committed by Hamas. Tonight, if you watch on BBC Two, you'll see the first of a two-part series looking at the run-up to this. BBC is capable of making mistakes like any organisation. It genuinely tries to report on as it is. And what you've got to understand is, apart from Israel not allowing independent journalists in there, there's a propaganda war going on here. And
many would say the BBC are part of that, Roger.
No, they're not. No, well, the BBC are in the middle, and they're caught between two propagandists who are fighting, understandably.
So if you, all right, well, you've been very honest with me. I'll be very honest with you because you haven't answered the question. If you are being told that your licence fee is to provide funds for, hear me out, an unbiased state broadcaster, how are you going to feel, not in the ivory tower of White City or wherever they are nowadays, if you feel that, for example, you believe that Hamas is a terrorist organisation? They've been very vocal about Israel, quite rightly in some instances, the BBC. You admitted it. You're no longer there. Why is there within the BBC, I don't even know how to describe it, but this desire to not do what makes sense to most people in this country? Hamas is a terrorist organisation.
Yeah,
so I ask you, why won't they say that?
Let me give you some facts. Right? The BBC's job is to report what's going around the world fairly, objectively, and all sides. There's a propaganda war going on, and it gets criticised understandably. But let's look at what's happening in Gaza. I've already said what Hamas did on September the 7th was appalling.
But the BBC haven't, Roger. You can't sit there and defend them if you won't answer them. They haven't, though, have they? So I'm all right to say to you, why haven't the BBC said what you've said? That's my question.
What I'm going to tell you is this. In Gaza, around about 50,000 people have been killed. About 2,000 of them were Israeli. So about 96%.
You're just throwing facts at me, but you won't answer the question. You're answering. Why won't the BBC call them Hamas a terrorist organisation? I'm just asking you.
I'm just trying to explain that to you, because the BBC can't go around calling every country in the world and every organisation in the world of which it disapproves terrorists. We had a situation in Northern Ireland 30 years ago in the Troubles where people were saying, call the IRA terrorists. Now, the IRA committed terrorist acts, but they were also representing a political perspective on Ireland. 20 years later, they're part of government. We called one of the original, later on, prime ministers of Israel a terrorist as a British government. But the BBC's job is not to go and say they're a terrorist, whatever. The BBC's job is to report.
Do you believe? Right, fine. But they've called other organisations terrorists. But you won't. You keep saying to me, but just please let me get this out. There are many people who believe, led by Cami Badenoch, I don't necessarily agree with a lot she says, that Gaza film was propaganda in its very essence. I repeat for the third time.
Why?
You no longer what?
Why was it propaganda?
Because they're a terrorist organisation, and everybody knows that. Why won't the BBC admit that? Why won't the BBC admit they're a terrorist organisation? That's the only question I've got for you.
No, the question you were saying was propaganda. Why is it propaganda? I watched the film. What you saw there were a number of children. It was a film made looking through what had happened through the eyes of children.
No, through the eyes of a Hamas official's son, a terrorist son.
Done that, but the fact is, these buildings were destroyed. The fact is, almost 50,000 people.
His father's a terrorist, though. His father's a terrorist.
Hold on. What that film showed was what life was like in Gaza.
But his father was a terrorist, so it was biased.
No.
Because his father... But hold on a second, they didn't show in that film through They didn't show a picture or a documentary through the eyes of an Israeli child whose father was blown to bits or mother was blown to bits in October 2.5 years ago, whenever it was.
Yes, they have. They transmitted a film. I've seen the film. I've seen both films. The film, they transmitted a film with the families of those hostages, with people who lost people in that terrorist act by Hamas. They've done that. They keep reporting this particular film, and they made a mistake in not saying the relationship with the boy, the minister. This film showed a reality, one set of realities in Gaza. They didn't invent
one set of realities.
They didn't invent 50,000. What you've got to understand is there's a propaganda war here, and I understand why.
You've said that already.
If I was Jewish, with the background that Jews have had of anti-Semitism and Holocaust, whatever, I would be probably saying what they're saying. But another thing, according to Jewish policy research, this was in September the 17th, 2024, Jewish policy research, 80% of British Jews hold unfavourable views of Netanyahu. That doesn't get reported because Jews understand they don't want to criticise openly, publicly, Israel. But that's what they feel, according to Jewish policy research. So the people who are complaining up from the Israeli embassy and elsewhere are part of a propaganda war. I would do it if I were them, but that's propaganda. Don't confuse it with BBC bias. BBC is trying to report...
Do you think BBC is biased? Do you think they're biased?
No, I think they make mistakes, but I don't think.
Do you think it's a mistake? We've been 17 minutes on air and you still haven't answered the question, which, don't take this the wrong way, is typical of the BBC. Do you believe that the BBC should call Hamas a terrorist organisation?
No, I've told you no.
But you believe it's a terrorist organisation?
I do, yes. But
so if you were working at the BBC, you would say to your bosses, I absolutely am not taking part in any documentary unless I can tell you what I think about Hamas.
No, because my job is not to tell you my opinion. If I'm employed by the BBC, my job is to find out the facts as I can and report them fairly and honestly and objectively.
Do you believe that was an objective film, Roger?
I think there are problems with that film because they should have identified the son, but the it being in relationship with a Hamas minister. But the fundamental problem is independent journalists are not allowed by Israel into Gaza. Why? When you look at the destruction, which is real, when you look at the deaths, which is real, when you look at the numbers of mothers and children killed, which is real, you should report on it. Israel won't allow us to do. Now, Hamas...
I don't disagree with that, but I will say one thing, and this is just, you know, we can disagree about the approach of the BBC. It's a bit like the civil service to me. It's just an honest opinion. I completely accept your point of view. For you, I disagree with it, but that's what a democracy is. What I think people at the BBC, not you necessarily, but people high up at the BBC, people high up in the civil service fail to understand is the growing frustration amongst average people, more mundane, mainstream people who do everything correctly and whose voice is either looked down upon by organisations like the BBC or the civil service, who are no longer prepared to be ignored. And I have to tell you, the BBC in years to come, not because I work here or... forget, but this is choice. I think people are increasingly fed up, Roger Bolton, paying £170 a year to be told that they are being not preached to and there isn't an agenda to what the BBC is doing. And you and I can argue, but I think the BBC is at an absolutely important point in its history because this isn't going away, my friend. Final word from you.
No, as it happens, I agree with a lot of the things that you said. I think the BBC needs to be more accountable. I do think there's a problem with the licence fee. The problem is there's a problem with any other way of paying it. But I think we need to have, and actually one of the conditions of talk and everything existing, and you should exist, and you should be able to say whatever you like. But I say a condition of that in many ways is that we try and have an organisation whose job is to report objectively and fairly, to be pulled up, but to be criticised by people like you when it doesn't and makes mistakes. But it tries to be. But
I don't think it does it objectively. That would be the reason.
Please recognise just at the back there's a propaganda war going on. Don't be sucked into one side rather than the other.
But I would say that the BBC is part of that propaganda war. But listen, it is always it's always good to agree to disagree, Roger Bolton. Thank you very much indeed, former BBC executive who started this interview by saying they got rid of me twice. This is Talk Drive.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
20 to 6, I admire people like Roger Bolton. Listen, he and I might disagree on certain things, but he's good enough to come on. That is the point of free speech. That is the point of common sense and your right to have an opinion. 0344 499 1000. Hello to, Jez. That's not true what Bolton just said. Journalist in Israel, Douglas Murray spent time with the IDF and went into Gaza and along the West Bank. Douglas is a man of integrity. Al Jazeera journalists also go on the BBC programmes for discussion. Says Paula Trevor says, it's funny how the BBC are more than happy to label people far right, yet they can't call Hamas known murderers as terrorists. I would agree with that. Somebody in Bridgend. What an idiot. Israel won't let the BBC go into Gaza. Could that be because, I don't know, they probably might get killed? Interesting. Anna in Surrey. Different subject, but very interesting. Yesterday, ready for this, peeps? Why did I say peeps? I offered my help to a struggling organisation free of charge locally. The woman who spoke to me asked for my pronouns. I told her that as the role would be administering help to injured wildlife, that I expected a basic knowledge of biology that isn't relevant to pronouns. Today they turned my offer down. It seems hurty words are more important than animal welfare. Fireman training needs a certain level of upper body strength that females, I'm sorry, this is a female, don't have. Like the injured wildlife, people trapped in fires just want the best help available. The world has gone flipping mad. Chris Hilton says, I love Poppy Coburn. I agree, Mark Hill. Regarding the gingerbread men people, are we even allowed to call them ginger? Might that not be offensive to people who are redheads? Just a thought. That's true. We had a story. We had a woman on the show earlier who went to ask for a gingerbread man and she got told you can't say that, that's sexist. But can you say ginger? Strawberry blonde, you might offend the redheads. Oh, my God. 0344 499 1000 to the phone lines. We're going to London. James, you're on Talk Drive. How are you?
Not too bad, JK. JK, I just want to say your previous guest needs to take his Hamas tinted glasses off and watch the documentary again. Because there's 2 points which I rang up about. Is on that documentary, the child presenter said there was a lack of food and a lack of water. He then passes a store full of water and then goes and interviews a YouTuber who does bakery, and they then go to a store full of food. So what are we supposed to believe if this is just not propaganda?
I made a very honest point, because I always try. I hadn't seen it. I've been away. I know it caused complete outrage. My bigger point was, is if you're talking about an unbiased BBC, then surely the unbiased BBC needs to be straight down the middle. There are millions of people, not me, not just me, Roger Bolton, or other people at the BBC. There are millions of people who do not think that organisation is unbiased. In fact, they think it has its own agenda, which is to the left, that it sets out to deliberately do all the things that annoy so many people. And here's the thing, and this probably sounds like I'm calling out. So, don't listen to me, BBC. Don't listen to me. Sit and laugh and mock and do all your trendy things that you think are important. And the same thing will happen in this country as happened in America. Because people, not me, millions of people, BBC, are fed up to the back bloody teeth. James in London, thank you. Let's go to Coventry. David, are you a Coventry City football fan?
No.
What a job Frankie Lampard's doing. I was going to say, what a job special Frankie Lampard's doing at your team. He's doing brilliantly. Right, welcome to the show. How's Coventry today?
Pretty good.
What?
I never once had anybody ask me or any of my colleagues about their origins, their colour, the colour of their skin, their religion or anything else. They were just glad to have somebody there competent to deal with them. And I genuinely believe that the senior officers that got this report written should all be sacked for gross misconduct in a public office, for wasting public money, blatantly wasting public money, because that's what this is.
You mean you don't believe that the fire service is institutionally racist, homophobic and misogynistic?
I think most of the members of the public couldn't give a flying damn.
I said at 4 o'clock, and they all looked at me in this studio like I'd landed from Mars, that I couldn't give a fat rat's arse, I'm going to say it now, who turns up in the truck, who's holding the hose, as long as you put the bloody fire out in my house. I don't understand why we are wasting our lives having these inane conversations about things that really don't matter. When, and actually, is this not the point, David? This country is struggling in so many areas that we could be doing things about, and we get stuck on this, all words, and it's got to be right, and we've got to worry about, Jesus Christ, there are people not able to see a doctor, people being mugged, kids being raped, there's people suffering, there's old pensioners dying from no heating, and we're arguing the top. I don't understand it, mate. I never have. I don't get it.
Like I say, you pay those people huge salaries, probably £120,000, £140,000 a year. They should be sacked for gross misconduct in a public office. They're wasting public money. It would make other people in the quangos, in the civil service and elsewhere think, maybe, do I really need to do this? And is this a sensible thing to do? Would most people in Great Britain agree with what I'm doing? And the answer, with an awful lot of the woke rubbish is, and the net zero, is no, most people wouldn't agree.
Well, while you're on, I'm going to ask you the question that I said to the last guy. Do you think that the BBC licence fee is still applicable and justifiable in 2025?
The only reason I pay it is because my wife insists on watching BBC Wildlife and Bakery and all that sort of programmes. Apart from that, I'd cancel it tomorrow.
Good man. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you to David in Coventry. Sean McKeever. I love that name. This is Sean McKeever here. Why have I done that accent? I was in the fire service during the 90s, Jez. I was a station officer in London. On my crew of 14, I had 2 female firefighters as well as men from all backgrounds. Even then, there was extreme sensitivity to make sure everyone was treated fairly and equally. I think the idea that the fire service is institutionally racist or sexist is a load of old... Oh, good. Good. Hello to Glenn in Leeds. It really sums up this Labour government. If you speak your mind, you're too far right. If you speak your mind on Facebook, you get a visit from the police. MPs punch their constituents who disagree with them. MPs on WhatsApp groups slag off the people they're supposed to represent. There's a level of arrogance and entitlement from this government that I never thought that would exist, but is currently making me feel very sick. I could not agree more. It's 14 minutes to 6 o'clock. So many people trying to get on. Am I reading some more? How many people have texted? Why is this fella prevaricating? This will be Roger Bolton about the BBC bias. It's just cringeworthy by the way he's obfuscating and squirming to avoid saying the BBC should call Hamas terrorists. By the way, the real casualty figures he's quoting are from the Hamas-run health ministry and have been proven false on many occasions. Thank you, Mike in Lincoln. Richard Tice was in earlier. That garnered some response as well. Oh, hold on a second. The BBC guy just said that the IRA wasn't a terrorist group. My community, friends and family who suffered at their hands would tell you otherwise. Jez says, Pete in North Somerset, he's wound up. Your ex-BBC man was wrong about the BBC coverage of the IRA during the Troubles. I remember Margaret Thatcher instructing that the BBC would not allow the voices of Gerry Adams or any of his henchmen to be broadcast in news programmes. Selective memory or what? Peter Yates Round. Hello to Neil. Is it Neil? I think Richard Tice has just shown us where his loyalties lie. Clearly his priority is the Trump, Musk, Putin axis over the needs and wants of Ukrainians. Well done in holding Richard Tice to account. 13 minutes to 6. On the way, sport. I don't know what's happened to Sam Ellard. I was away for 1 week. Sam Ellard was our sports person. I think he's been jettisoned because coming next is a man, this is true story, we worked together 25 years ago. And I am responsible for him ending up broadcasting, for which I apologise. We're coming back in 3 on Talk Drive.
You know, Europe is still completely beholden to Vladimir Putin for Russian gas. And we import an awful lot of our gas because we don't produce enough ourselves anymore because of net zero. And now a possible future source of it, and a source which has meant that, you know, gas is, you know, really cheap comparatively in America because of their fracking. We're about to literally fill those wells up with concrete and make them unusable. What on earth are they thinking?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
About 10 to 6, we're live across the United Kingdom. This is JK on the home of common sense and free speech. My God. Do you know, there are moments in your broadcasting career when you realise you've been doing this for too bloody long, because somebody who started out as your T-boy is now on the radio with you. Push the button, Ames.
Sport Summary on Talk.
Ian Danter, how are you, son?
I'm all right, Jezza. You're about the fourth person who's claimed responsibility for my ascent into broadcasting. So, yeah, join the queue.
Are you saying that it wasn't me, Dancer? I remember when you had hair when it was dark, but you still had the same dress sense. That's an appalling hoodie, isn't it? What's going on? Come on.
Tom Ross, the former head of sports at our old radio station, really is the man that would lay claim to my to the start in broadcasting. But I was more than your T-boy. I think I was bottle washer as well as T-boy.
He's a great man, ladies and gentlemen. Ian Dancer and I, how many years ago was it, Dance? What's happening now? 30 years ago?
It was, 1998 was when I started.
He did a programme called The Barmy Brummies, ladies and gentlemen, because you're a yam-yam, aren't you?
No, well, I'm a Brummie. I mean, Yam-Yam's different. That's Wolverhampton and the Black Country, so you've got to make that distinction.
Are you a Blue Nose, then, or an Aston Villa fan?
Oh, always, yes, absolutely. That wasn't even a choice. That's hereditary disease passed down from generation to generation.
Before we talk about the Premier League and Liverpool and all that, let's talk about the greatest game of football on Saturday. What was that?
That would be West Ham winning at Arsenal, I'm assuming. From your point of view.
Honestly, do you know the number of Spurs fans that have come up to me and gone, "Oh, Jez, great, we love you." I mean, West Ham were rubbish, but Arsenal, on a serious note, Dance, what were that? They needed a centre forward. They look, the title's gone, hasn't it?
Mikel Arteta's had, by my reckoning, 10 transfer windows to find a striker and hasn't managed it in any one of them. He decided to get rid of Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang when he may or may not have been causing trouble and been divisive in the dressing room. That will come out in the wash in years to come. But there has been no successful acquisition in a transfer window of a striker. So I'm afraid, Jez, it's on him.
It is, and it's really interesting. Piers is a big fan, and he was livid. I mean, Liverpool winning yesterday, clinical away performance at Man City to go 11 points clear. And frankly, I watched it yesterday with Henry, and Liverpool looked different class. I mean, I don't think Arsenal can claw it back. What do you make of Liverpool under Slot, not Klopp? Do you think he's just in there? Because he seems to have taken them somewhere further than Jurgen Klopp had, if I'm honest.
Yes, I think he's turned them into a side that can be a little more structured. We all knew about Jurgen Klopp's sort of heavy metal football, as they called it, the gegenpressing, which was very high octane and pushing high up the field. But I think there's a bit of discipline added to that with what Arne Slot has brought to Liverpool. And a player like Ryan Gravenberch has been reinvented to a degree as a defensive midfielder. Very cleverly played without really a central striker yesterday. He just had players shifting positions around. The work rate is still there. You saw Dominic Szoboszlai sort of fall to the turf on the full-time whistle, absolutely exhausted because he put one hell of a shift in. Mind you, at the other end of the pitch, there's Virgil van Dijk.
Amazing.
Barely got his kit dirty. Didn't need to. And Liverpool, in some areas of the pitch, didn't have to get out of second gear yesterday. Very, very clinical performance, as you suggest.
Now, you, of course, are one of the main men at talkSPORT, our sister station. Some big news. 10 midweek Premier League games starting tomorrow. Wolves-Fulham tomorrow night. And then the big one on Wednesday. Well, I mean, Wolves-Fulham is a big game. But Liverpool-Newcastle, my second team, on Wednesday. All commentary on talkSPORT from 7 o'clock on Talk. It's a new thing, right?
Yes, that's right. So we're taking over the Talk airwaves just for a couple of nights because it's not often that we get all 10 Premier League fixtures in the midweek that we can do exclusively. So between talkSPORT, talkSPORT 2, the talkSPORT app, and where we are now on Talk, we'll bring all 10 games. So, for example, tomorrow night, as you say, I'm going to be at Molineux with Danny Mills, the former England fullback, for Wolves against Fulham. That kicks off at 7:30. The coverage will start at 7. And then Liverpool-Newcastle on Wednesday night. I'll be at Anfield for that one with Mickey Gray. Again, it's on Talk. And I think that's an 8 or 8:15 kickoff. The second half will then move on to talkSPORT as well. So we're very gracious that you've lent us the airways. On
no, listen, it's a massive thing, and we're all in the same stable. 10 midweek Premier League games starting tomorrow. Wolves-Fulham live on Talk from 7 o'clock, and of course Wednesday Liverpool-Newcastle. It's actually 8:15. Let me test you because you know I'm an old man. I'm 60 this year, an old man. So you are who are you doing the commentary with tomorrow at Molineux?
Tomorrow at Molineux is Danny Mills.
And what's he famous for?
Grabbing Robbie Savage around the neck, I seem to remember, in a Birmingham-Middlesbrough game, but that's just me with my Birmingham...
What's his son famous for?
Oh, well, he's got two famous sons. Stanley is a footballer, and George is a middle-distance runner who's just set a British record, I think, for 5,000 metres.
I was trying to help you out, Dance. I was trying to help you out. Newcastle, very quickly, not much time. My second team, my best mate lives in Newcastle. I mean, they go 1-0 down, and you just think, that's it, Nottingham Forest. Then they go 4-1 up at about 12 minutes. And then they hold on by their lives and win 4-3. He's done a great job there. I mean, for me, and all of my Newcastle mates are all saying one thing. They've got an eye on the Carabao Cup. That's their big thing, isn't it, to try and finally win a trophy. But they're still doing really well in the Premier League as well. They could still get into the Champions League, right?
They can still, I mean, it goes down to 5th this year by the looks of it, with the way that the coefficient's working with European clubs. So England will get an extra place. Newcastle are one of a number of sides flitting around the area. Manchester City are in there. Even Fulham, who I'm watching tomorrow night, are in there. They're not cut adrift from that chase. Bournemouth, who've done brilliantly.
Amazing.
But Newcastle, they're a bit of a curate's egg, Jez, because some weeks they can be awful, like when they were at Manchester City and lost 4-0. And I saw them at Brentford about a month and a half ago when they lost 4-2, and again defending completely at a premium, and then they'll go and slice somebody apart, and that was 4 goals in 7 minutes yesterday against Forest. So what they'll do at Liverpool on Wednesday night, it's anybody's guess.
Be a hell of a game. That'll be a hell of a game, and I think we'll tell everybody. Can I just also say, if you're just tuning in, you've heard Dance say that the airways have talked from 7 o'clock on the radio side this week. Tuesday, Wolves, Fulham, live tomorrow night with Ian Danter on Talk. On Wednesday, Liverpool, Newcastle, live with Ian Danter. And guess it's just the Ian Danter show. You can still watch the legend that is Kev O'Sullivan, who's obviously devastated that Ian Danter's been to... Anyway, connected devices and YouTube just for 2 nights. Don't abandon poor Kev, but you can have one ear on the football and one eye on Kevin O'Sullivan, he's a Fulham fan, by the way. So if I was O'Sullivan, instead of moaning, do you know what I would do? I'd take the night off and listen to your commentary and get paid for doing nothing.
Well, maybe he can stick me in his ear. One ear for talk to listen to the producer, one ear for me.
Let's have predictions then. You're at Wolves tomorrow taking on Fulham. Wolves will look a better unit since they got rid of Gary O'Neill. I like Gary O'Neill, but they seem more solid. Do you think they can get a result there? I see a draw, Wolves-Fulham. They are next on the line.
What Wolves need to do is get back-to-back wins at home. They can't seem to follow up one home win with another. So, and Fulham, I mean, as I say, they're up towards the top of the table. Very disappointing performance against Palace on Saturday. I think we might see a reaction from Fulham and an away win there, Jez.
OK. And Newcastle-Liverpool, I hate to be boring. I see that as a draw.
No, I think Liverpool will have enough. I think Liverpool will win, not convincingly, but 2-1 or 3-1, something like that. I think for Liverpool, it's just a juggernaut at the moment, and very few people can get in their way.
It's so lovely to have you. It's been too many years, 35 years. We were delighted to lend you the airways. I will repeat, from tomorrow night, 7 o'clock, Tuesday night, Wolves Fulham, Talk Sport commentary with the amazing Ian Danter. It says amazing Ian Danter here. And then Wednesday, Liverpool Newcastle on Talk from 7 with the amazing Ian Danter. You can, of course, though, keep watching Kev O'Sullivan, connected devices and YouTube. Ian Danter, thank you so much indeed. Do not miss that, football fan. 10 midweek Premier League games starting tomorrow. Wolves, Fulham, courtesy of TalkSport on this station, Talk from 7, and Wednesday, Liverpool, Newcastle on Talk. Kev on connected devices, whatever that means. I don't know. I do, really. And YouTube. 0344 499 1000, by the way, if you want to be on drive time, heading to the news at 6. And, of course, whatever you want to talk about. There's been so much in the news today. Apparently, the fire service is misogynistic, homophobic and institutionally racist. Apparently, Donald Trump will sort out Ukraine, which could result in Zelensky saying, I don't want to be president anymore. The BBC seemed to have carried out a documentary where the son of a Hamas official, who they won't call a terrorist, was maybe or maybe not paid money. The world's going mad, and we are here for you to tell us what you think of it all. 0344 499 1000. Text to 87222, and the news at 6 is next, my friends.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Hour 3 drive for Monday. We're live across the UK and Talk, the home of free speech and common sense. I love that. Listen, there aren't many people I miss, but I miss my best mate Mike Graham when I'm away, and he just texted me, "Good to have you back, mate." What's wrong with you, Graham? I'm currently making a Spanish stew with barley and black pudding. Can you say that? Can you say barley anymore? Is he? He's turned into a proper cook, him, isn't he? That's really impressive. Mike Graham, by the way, I don't need to tell you this, but I'm going to anyway. Back tomorrow morning from 6 o'clock. It's the best breakfast show in the land, the only way to wake up. It's Morning Glory with Mike Graham, and it's exclusive here on Talk of Home, of course, of the home of free speech and common sense. And Mike here Monday to Friday from 6 until 10. Tomorrow morning, Peter Blexley running through the papers with Mike from 6 till 7. And then just your involvement for 3.5 hours, whatever you want to talk about. And the usual number. Talking of which, we're going back to the phone lines on Drive. Ian's in London. Ian, you're on Talk Drive. A very good evening. How are you?
Very well. And what's the greatest tea time show? The Jeremy Kyle show.
Who told you that?
I'm sorry.
You're very kind. I'm obviously drunk. Now, you're obviously... What?
Fan,
what?
And as a Spurs fan, thank you again for making Saturday afternoon wonderful.
I've got... One of my best mates, Dave, is a Spurs fan, right? And they're just on and on the whole time how rubbish West Ham. And suddenly everybody's like, oh, West Ham, Jez, we love you. Arsenal were crap. Not even going to lie. They were rubbish. No. So listen, Ian in London, let me see what I can guess. Are you going to talk about BBC, the fire service, or Mike Amesbury punching one of his constituents? What are you going for?
BBC. I think, to be honest, they have played a blinder. I know this might seem daft, because everybody's talking about it and it's bringing more views onto the BBC and the Gaza and everything else. But what everybody's forgotten, I don't know if you saw it on Saturday when they did the hostages and they had the 2 other Israeli boys in the back of the van watching what was going on as torture with the Red Cross in the van next to them, not saying a dicky bird. But everybody forgets that.
The interesting thing for me, and I you know, sometimes when you do a job like this, you'll go home and you think, I wish I'd put that differently, so I'll probably get this wrong. I'm fine with the people who don't have my political persuasion. I love all that. I love democracy. That's fine. What happened in America should be a wake-up call. Now, they can all stand around and tell me that Donald Trump's an outrage and he's a racist and he's a rapist and he's this, that and the other, right? Oh dear. Breaking news. Can you... Are you still there, Ian?
I'm here.
This has just been reported by Nick Parker in The Sun. This is an exclusive on Talk, ladies and gentlemen. We can now tell you that the BBC, pin back your luggos, spent £400,000 of your licence fee cash making a documentary branded by us, a propaganda show for an evil terrorist group, Hamas, that the BBC won't call a terrorist group. Highly placed sources confirmed the huge sum was handed to the production company behind controversial primetime programme Gaza, How to Survive a War Zone. The main narrator of the heart-tugging, supposedly factual expose, 13-year-old Abdullah Al-Azhar, was revealed to be the son of a senior Hamas official. Money spent on the hour-long BBC programme was revealed yesterday as Tory leader Kemi Badenoch demanded to know whether that had gone to Hamas. BBC bosses were forced to withdraw the documentary from its iPlayer last week, pending further due diligence checks after being accused of pro-Hamas bias. Anger has grown, but this is official now. The BBC, and you can respond first, Ian, and if you want to make a call now, people, 0344 499 1000, we can exclusively reveal via Nick Parker at The Sun, the BBC spent 400 grand of your licence payers' cash on that documentary narrated by the son of a terrorist, or a Hamas official, I should say. Thoughts, please, Ian, in London?
What about how many million did David Lammy give to UNRWA?
Sorry, mate, what did you say?
How many millions were actually given by David Lammy to UNRWA that went straight into Hamas's coffers as well?
It's interesting, isn't it? It is quite frightening, I think, too. And we had a guy on, Stuart Bolton, who was defending the BBC some time ago, Roger Bolton, I should say, and he said, look, I don't work for them, but the BBC's remit is to actually be as unbiased as possible. And he kept saying to me, the Israelis won't allow the BBC into Gaza, and this was the best thing possible. It was quite balanced, but patently, people, whoever those people are angry, but we can confirm that 400 grand... Are you happy for your licence fee cash to be paid on that, spent on that?
Not at all. And if you think about it, which is a downright lie, because international reporters do go into Gaza. They go into the Gaza, they get shown the tunnels, they get to see everything else. So all of it is a load of cobblers.
Really good to have you on. Thank you, Ian, in London. That is breaking news. Nick Parker from The Sun, thank you very much indeed. Can we try and get Nick Parker on before 7? Could we try and give him a call? This is an exclusive. One of our colleagues at The Sun, Nick Parker, the BBC spending 400 grand of licence payers' cash on the controversial Gaza document branded a propaganda tool for Hamas. Actually, we're going to go to our next guest. See if we can get Nick Parker on and some calls. My next guest, although he is a former NATO and Royal Navy commander, Rear Admiral Chris Parry, lots to talk about. But Chris, welcome to the show. I'd like your instant reaction to that. The BBC, it can be confirmed, The Sun have just printed this, they spent 400 grand of licence payers' cash on that controversial Gaza documentary, branded propaganda. This is an organisation, Chris Parry. I've been slagged off all day by people on text saying, the BBC's doing a good job. How can they do a good job when they won't call Hamas a terrorist organisation, my friend?
Well, it's because it's an organisation that's out of control. They make extensive use of so-called independent production companies, don't do enough assurance and checks, due diligence checks. And we've got to appreciate that many of our institutions and companies today have been subverted by activists.
It's really interesting, isn't it? I mean, that you make a really good point for people just tuning in. The BBC would have commissioned that through a production company. Yeah. And at the first sign of any crap, let's blame the production company, irrespective of the fact that if you're the BBC or another main broadcaster, you'll take all the credit when something goes well, but you'll know where to be seen. I mean, the thing is, I mean, I don't know if you heard the Roger Bolton thing. He was saying, you're being really unfair. It's a propaganda war. The Israelis, said Roger Bolton. You can answer this, Chris. You'd know more than me. Independent journalists aren't allowed in. The Israelis won't allow any journalists in. So the BBC, this was their best way of doing a documentary. And I'm saying to him, what, the son of a terrorist official? How is that how is that not biased? How is that not propaganda?
Well, it's either a feeble argument or a feeble mind that says that, I'm afraid.
It's really interesting, right? It's all happening now. Honestly, Chris, this is unbelievable that you're on at this time. We've now got a statement, exclusive statement from the BBC people. Gaza, how to survive a war zone. This is from the BBC just now. Features important stories we think should be told. Those of the experiences of children in Gaza. There have been continuing questions raised about the programme, and in light of these, we are conducting further due diligence with the production company. I would respectfully suggest that major broadcasters might well do better to further due diligence before they work with production companies, no?
Yeah, I mean, they're doubling down. This is Goebbels-level propaganda in response. At the end of the day, they've messed up. They should have done their due diligence, and now they're trying to deflect attention by saying it's about children. It's not about that at all. It's about a political agenda put forward by a terrorist organisation. They should just, dare I say it, man up and admit they made a mistake.
You can't say that. Don't be sexist, otherwise you won't be able to join the fire service. We'll talk about that in a sec. Interestingly, Stuart, on the text, Jezza, the BBC staff responsible for spending 400 grand to the Hamas terrorist organisation should be sacked immediately. The BBC is state-owned, so that is the same as state-funded terrorism. Do you know what it gets? I mean, Chris, we've talked about loads over the years, you and I love having you on, but what really frustrates me, pal, is that listen, Roger Bolton's doing his job, that's fine, but the people who not look down their noses, but they go, there's people on talk, they're to the right, and these people do not seem to understand that there is real anger not just in this studio, in your house, there are millions of people across the United Kingdom who are fed up with the BBC, with the Blob, with this agenda to try and bring in diversity and exclusivity and all that. People who just work hard and pay their bills and feel they're at the back of the queue, who are hacked off about immigration, who are hacked off that our defences aren't stronger, who are hacked off that we, you know, are able to freeze pensioners to death whilst giving money to Africa, I don't know where. And I do think that the BBC and, I don't know, all sorts of organisations want to be very careful not to just look down their noses and cast this aside, because if you look across the pond, 90 million Americans went, you might think we're mad, but we've had enough of this. And I honestly believe in the next 5 years something similar is going to happen here. I really do.
I think the real problem is the old John Stuart Mill quotation that if good people do nothing, then bad things happen. And I'm afraid to say that everybody thinks it's everybody else's business to sort this out. We just have to be more political with a small p, all of us. And when we see something that's wrong, we have to say it. And I think that sort of instinct has been suppressed for about the last 10 to 15 years. And if we think something's wrong, we should say it. I mean, if we have an Islamophobia law coming in, for example, all of us are going to get banged up because if we're not Islamists, we're going to say, well, actually, we don't support this. You know, I'm a Christian, and am I going to say that I support Islam? Of course I'm not. And so what's going to happen there? Am I going to be prosecuted because I won't support Islam? It's a ridiculous situation. We've got to be able to say what we think. If we say what we think, we get a good creative tension. Like you, Jeremy, I don't mind hearing from people who don't agree with me. No. I want to have a good discussion with people, and then we come to either a compromise or the best argument wins. That's how democracy works.
Absolutely.
Democracy ain't working at the moment.
But this is two old men. This is two old men who don't get enough sleep because we've both got young babies. But this is the difference. This is the argument that I have with my daughter, right? I love democracy. I love the fact that people have different opinions, genuinely. What I can't do is be told that because I'm of a certain age and a certain belief that everything I believe in or was brought up to believe in should be trashed, thrown in the rubbish, and should be, you know, forever stamped all over. You know, democracy is all sides to the argument. That's why we had Roger Bolton on. Can I ask you, in your infinite wisdom, at 6:15 on a Monday, we started this show 2.25 hours ago, talking about what's going on in Ukraine. You've always been somebody who puts it into layperson's terms. See what I did there, Chris Perry? When we were talking on talkTV Breakfast, when the horrors of Ukraine became apparent, and, you know, Zelensky was floated as this incredible human being, we opened our hearts and our homes to the Ukrainian people quite rightly. Boris Johnson galvanised Europe to provide support in terms of munitions and money and everything. I understand that Donald Trump got elected on "I'm going to sort this out," but what the hell is he doing, calling Vladimir Zelensky an unelected dictator? What's he trying to achieve? I mean, you're a military man. What is his strategy or madness?
Well, it's the use of madness for strategy. Jeremy, if one watched President Trump during his first term, what he does is he outrages you with what he's doing with his right hand, while his left hand is doing something completely different. And so anything that he has said is part of the negotiating that's going on. He has actually brought Putin to a position where he's actually going to talk about this. That wasn't possible before January. Putin would have fought on. Even now, the Ukrainians and the Russians are fighting for a better position at the negotiating table. But there's a bigger agenda here, Jeremy. This is not just about ending the war in Ukraine. This is President Trump and his administration's attempt to detach Russia from China. This is to drive a wedge between the two. So he's saying nice things about Putin, he's saying bad things about Zelensky right now, but at the negotiating table, I bet you the narrative is totally different, and they're levering all sorts of deals even as we speak.
So for people like me who would see this on news stories or read it online or whatever, or in newspapers, we're thinking, oh my God, but you're saying there is strategy to this. You're saying that everybody's going, oh my God, why are you saying that to Zelensky? But there's a reason that you're saying that Trump is... But I mean, do you think he's going to sell the Ukrainian people down the river?
Well, it depends whether you think peace is selling people down the river. Right now, Ukrainian people are dying, so are Russian people. One might think the Russians deserve that because they are the aggressors. There's no question about that. Pete Hegseth today, the defense secretary, said, look, there's no doubt about what happened. We know Russia invaded Ukraine, but all this rhetoric isn't helping getting people to the peace negotiations. So the key thing is to stop the fighting and then see the terms under which there can be a permanent peace afterwards. It doesn't need a ceasefire. It doesn't need a frozen conflict because it just means that President Putin will come back next year and take Odessa and Moldova. So what's going to produce a lasting peace in Europe? There are two separate issues here, Jeremy. One is Ukraine. The other is peace in Europe, and people are confusing the two at the moment. You've seen what's going on, trying to get more defense expenditure for Europe because they think that the Americans are going to move away. I don't think that's entirely true at all. Again, it's left hand, right hand by President Trump. He wants us to invest more. The way I've explained it in the past is that in the old days, if there was trouble in the world, the Americans would say, look, we're the sheriff. We'll hand out a few deputies' badges. We'll form a posse, we'll go and sort it out. You and I call it a coalition, and everybody comes home. Now what they're saying is you've got to invest in your own defence, whether it's the Indo-Pacific, Japan, all that sort of thing, or Europe. And if you do that, the US cavalry will come. But otherwise, the posse won't form.
I must say, one of the things being on holiday for last week that I do feel very strongly about is that what he has achieved in a very short space of time is woken up the idiotic leaders of most of Europe, including our own. And I don't blame, by the way, I'm going to make the point, I don't blame Starmer for this. This has gone on for 14 years. It started with Cameron. The state of our defence system is a disgrace. We've never spent enough money. It's been an easy cut for far, far too many governments to make. And actually what Trump is saying is quite right. I've got issues with China. You need to step up to the plate and always stop listening to relying on America. And I just want to read this to you. I started with this on the show. Somebody sent this, Chris. The leaders of 500 million Europeans are waiting for 340 million Americans to protect them from 140 million Russians who haven't been able to beat 30 million Ukrainians in 3 years. In that instance, he's absolutely right, Donald Trump, isn't he?
Yeah, it gets worse than that, because if you do a calculation of how much it would cost to get European defence capabilities up to the same level where they can confront Russia conventionally, it's 500 billion euros. Now, everybody says, well, that's a huge number. And then you think, hang on, just a minute, that's half the annual defence budget of the United States. Yeah. And that's the way the Americans see it. You can't afford half our annual defence budget. And as you say, with all that population, all that wealth, well, you know, step aside.
I mean, I believe that the one thing he will achieve is he'll focus, will he not, Europe's need to actually do something about that. I think that will definitely come from what he's attempting to do, won't it?
Well, it depends. I mean, there is another alternative, and that is Europe accepts that it's a tiny collection of states on the end of Russia and China's continent of Eurasia. And, you know, some of the European leaders are sort of trending that way. Even our own government is sucking up to China at the moment. But, you know, if you want to be free, if you like your democracy, if you like our way of life, then you actually have to defend it and show that you're prepared to defend it.
It's great to have you on always. Before you go, apparently the fire service is institutionally racist, sexist and homophobic. Are you like me, though? If your house was on fire, you just wouldn't care who was driving the truck. You just want the fire put out.
Yeah, they should put fires out and rescue people. That's their job. That's what we pay them for.
Good man. Lovely to have you on. 6:20. The legend that is Rear Admiral Chris Parry, former NATO and Royal Navy commander, talking all things there, not only the Trump situation, Ukraine and Zelensky, but also the BBC. If you're just tuning in, breaking news 20 minutes ago on tour. Kemi Badenoch stood up, didn't she, over the weekend and said, hold on a second, I want to know whether there was any cash used to make that dreadful documentary on the BBC. This was a programme called Gaza, How to Survive a War Zone. We can exclusively reveal via the Sun's Nick Parker. We did this 20 minutes ago, that sources reveal that the BBC spent £400,000 of your taxpayers' cash making that documentary. It was given to a production company, and the expose was narrated by the 13-year-old Abdullah Aliazor, who turned out to be the son of a senior Hamas official. Hamas, in brackets, the terrorist organisation that the BBC won't call a terrorist organisation. In close brackets, the BBC has jumped out and said it was very important that we talked about the children in Gaza, but we've pulled it off iPlayer, and we won't be playing it again because we need to do further due diligence on the production company we gave the gig to. It's not our responsibility. Why don't you do due diligence, you stupid idiots, before you commission the programme? 0344 419 1000 622. Mike Graham at this moment in time. This is how good technology is. Mike sends me a message and says, Jez, loving the programme. Glad you're back. I'm currently making a Spanish stew with barley, right, and chorizo. That's what he said to me. Barley and black pudding, I should say, right? But Mike, on the count of three, I want you to tell me how you can win 25 grand. 3, 2, 1, go.
It's competition time, and we're giving you a chance to win a whopping £25,000. So what do you need to do to get involved? All you have to do is text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post. It's as simple as that. Once again, to get involved, just text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post.
18 plus, UK excluding NI. Enter by SMS for £2 plus one standard network charge by 11 p.m. on March the 3rd, 2025. Or send your name, email and contact number to £25,000 cash competition, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, to arrive by 5 p.m. on March the 6th, 2025. This is a News Broadcasting Network promotion. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
You know, Europe is still completely beholden to Vladimir Putin for Russian gas. And we import an awful lot of our gas because we don't produce enough ourselves anymore because of net zero. And now a possible future source of it, and a source which has meant that, you know, gas is, you know, really cheap comparatively in America because of their fracking. We're about to literally fill those wells up with concrete and make them unusable. What on earth are they thinking?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Talk Drive, 6:25. I don't know where you've been under a stone somewhere. Breaking news in the last 25 minutes, all weekend. This conversation about this BBC documentary that was on last week. What was it called? It was called Gaza, How to Survive a War Zone. Basically, Kemi Badenoch, the Conservative leader, jumped up and down and said, hold on a minute, that was blatantly biased. That's what she said. We want to know more of this. Was any money spent on that? Because it transpired that the so-called narrator of what was a heart-tugging, supposedly factually exposed, was the 13-year-old son of a senior Hamas official. Now, wherever you stand on this, Hamas is a terrorist organisation, although the BBC won't call them that. So this caused a big furore. What's the truth? What's the truth? We find out in the last 25 minutes from Nick Parker, the Sun's esteemed colleague, the BBC spent 400 grand of licence payers' cash on this controversial Gaza documentary, branded a propaganda tool by many for Hamas. The BBC has come out straight away with a statement, which I haven't got this moment, but they basically said, you know, this was about children, and although, you know, that was our attempt, we do understand this is quite difficult, so we're going to take it off iPlayer whilst we go through sort of due diligence with the production company. And let me tell you from experience, that is a major broadcaster saying, I know we've had you on and we've done that, but we're not going to blame ourselves. We could have checked it and 15 lawyers would have done, but what we're going to do now is we're going to drop the production company right in the mire. So, listen, it'll be interesting to see what happens. 0344 499 1000. Will it be the BBC? Will it be the institutionally racist fire brigade, allegedly? Or will it be Ukraine? John is in Manchester. A very good evening. You're on Talk Drive, pal. How are you?
Good evening. How's yourself?
You what?
I say good evening. How's yourself?
Not too bad. Whereabouts in Manchester?
Well, actually, I'm outside. I'm in Staley Bridge.
Oh, posh there. People get over Staley
Used
Bridge.
to be till I moved up here.
Mate, what do you want to talk about on Talk Drive?
Well, basically, I want to stop you making a fool of yourself. Keep reading that. Is it an email or a text that somebody sent you? But getting away from that, this Zelensky nonsense, right? He is definitely a dictator.
He's not a dictator at all. He won an election. He won 73% of the vote. What are you talking about?
He turned into one.
Sorry?
He's turned into one.
How can he... What do you mean by that?
There's a little video sitting on my knee now, where it's taken a month ago, when the...
I'm really... Can you do me a favour, Jake? Because everybody's just... Can you just... John, we're going to try you back, mate. You sound like you're eating the microphone, and I struggle... I'm sorry, I'm not having a go. I want to speak to you, but signal's not very good. I think he was saying that he believes that Zelensky has technically turned into a dictator. I have to repeat what Jerome Starkey, the Sun's defence editor, said earlier. Zelensky won 73% of the vote. And actually, since then, obviously because they're at war, there are no elections and martial law is in place. So I suppose people would say what he says goes. But then if you look at what happened in the Second World War, as Jerome Starkey quite rightly said, that's what happened when Churchill was in charge. Not a great line. Jodie's going to try again. Let's go to Doncaster in the meantime. Tom is a new caller to talk. How are you, Tom?
I'm good. How are you, Jeremy?
Thanks for coming on, pal. What would you like to talk about?
Basically, there's discrimination in the fire service. I've done 17 years in the fire service, and there was a period of time when they actually had a campaign and floating around the fire service. It was positive discrimination.
Yeah.
I mean, any form of discrimination is discrimination in my eyes, and it shouldn't happen. That quite quickly got abolished, saying, look, it's at the end of the day, discrimination. Now, I've seen firsthand that there are campaigns in the fire service where we do try and reach out. I mean, I'm a firefighter. I'm not in any other community fire safety, anything like that. I'm a firefighter. I've seen campaigns actually try and reach out to the minority groups, whether they be ethnic minorities, to female firefighters, to just try and get them through the door to apply. But I can categorically say that I can only talk to my own brigade, is that we don't discriminate against anybody to join the fire service, because it's one of them policies where if you're good for the job, you get the job. You know, if you're the right person, you're the right person. Not right male, not right female, not right sexuality. If you're the right person, you get the job. And I've seen recruits come through, and female recruits don't make it through the 13-week training course because they just simply can't do the job. Now, I've also seen males, white males, as we've said on the show earlier, that not good enough for the job, so they haven't got through the process and have not been employed as on a full-time basis after the 13-week training course. So I just think for people to say that there's discrimination in the fire service, I just think that's somebody looking out from the outside looking in, where myself and speak about this at work with my colleagues and that we don't witness that. We haven't seen the discrimination. We don't think, even for white males, we can't employ them because they're white male. And on the flip coin, I don't hear. I've never ever heard. I've never known in the 17 years I've been in the fire service. Well, we need to get more blacks in, or we need to get more.
It's really interesting, actually. You're a new caller. You work for the fire service. For me, and I believe everything you're saying. For me, there's a bigger issue. Tom, and the reason that we've done this today on the show is because this, to me, is symptomatic of what's happening in this country. We've got problems left, right and bleeding centre. I mean, literally problems left, right and centre. And people are spending money on a report to discover whether the fire service is in fact institutionally racist, misogynistic and homophobic. I would respectfully suggest that most people listening to this, if there's a fire in their house or their shed or their business, they don't give a stuff the colour, creed, religion or sexuality of the person who's driving the truck or holding the hose. They just want the bloody fire put out. But we're talking about, it's a bit like the civil service, it's a bit like the NHS, we're talking about these huge institutions that seem to think that the answer to surviving in 2025 is to have hundreds of thousands of pounds spent on a thing that says, oh, we should have more women. Or, yeah, you're right. It doesn't matter what the colour of your skin is or what your sexuality. If you can do the bloody job, you can do the bloody job. But if we're getting to a point where we're saying to, you know, white, middle-class, able-bodied men, sorry, you're at the back of the queue because, you know, you don't tick a box, then we're not actually doing the fire service any favours, are we?
No, I totally agree with you. I totally agree with you. It is all about, God forbid if anybody's into a sticky situation where the house is on fire, they just want to see that big red bus with blue flashing lights off, with 4 or 5 competent firefighters getting out there and doing the job and putting the fire out and making sure nobody comes to any harm.
Tom, you do a great job, mate. We're very grateful for it, and I mean that. And your bosses should spend more time perhaps raising your wages than spending money on crap projects to find out whether there should be more diverse people inside. Colchester is where I got sacked for my first ever radio programme. Amy, you're on Talk Drive. Good evening.
Hello, Jeremy. How are you?
I'm all right. Do you think...
I've missed you, can I just say?
What?
I missed you, not on the radio. I haven't heard you for ages.
Oh, bless you. Are you a new caller? Are you a new listener?
No.
I've only been off a week. I went to Centre Parks. It was bloody awful. What do you want to talk... Now, I'm going to have a guess. What are you going to talk about? Are you going to talk about fire people or are you going to talk about the BBC? It's going to be one of those two.
I'm going to talk about the BBC.
Oh, yes.
Put it to public opinion, to the vote. Do you think the public would have let the BBC pay £400,000 for that documentary?
No, I don't. And do you know? Can I tell you one of the hardest things about this job? When you're sitting having a discussion with somebody, you know, from the BBC or somebody, you know, from you know, one of those sort of intelligent lefties who look down their noses, and they make everybody feel like we just know absolutely nothing. And I keep saying, listen, to forget me, go and ask the British public, okay? Go and ask the British public about immigration, and they will say, we're not racist, but we're sick to death of being 8th in the queue. We're sick to death of not being able to get Jack because people come from other countries who are criminals, many of them, not all of them, before you jump up and down, not you, other people. We feel we're at the back of the queue. It is exactly the same with the BBC. If you ask the majority of people, are you prepared to continue paying your licence fee at 172 quid for an organisation that is blatantly not straight down the line but has an agenda, I am totally with you. Millions would say, no, do away with it.
The only reason why I pay for my TV licence now is to watch Sky Sports at the weekend with my family. You know, it's just the whole thing is just completely wrong. I would like to get rid of it, but I can't because I watch live TV.
Do you? And this, I mean, you're responding to the news that the BBC spent 400 grand of licence payers' cash making a documentary that was narrated by a Hamas official's son, which I would say is slightly biased, but I could be wrong.
So where did the £400,000 go to? Did it go to Hamas? Did it?
Well, it presumably went to the production company, but I would I will tell you this is how television works. Production companies pitch ideas to television companies. It gets commissioned. They give money. They spend that money on making that programme. Then they give it back to the BBC. How much of that 400 grand, though, was given to Hamas or to that boy or to that boy's father? What did he do with that money?
Well, you'd really like to know, wouldn't you? But it's just so wrong. You know, they're an organisation, excuse my language here, but I'm not going to swear, by the way.
No, because I'll get sacked.
We're paying for Hugh Edwards' pension, you know?
Don't get me on my licence fee paying for that paedophile because he should be in jail. Don't start me on that because I'll get into trouble. Listen, the other thing is, because you obviously are all about common sense, apparently the fire service is institutionally racist, homophobic and misogynistic. Thoughts on that?
Please don't get me started.
We love you, Ames. Say hello to Colchester, the place that got rid of me. SGR was the radio station run. I was really excited. In 45 minutes and the bloke ran me out and went, don't be there after the 8 o'clock news, you crap. Nothing has changed. This is Talk Drive.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. So we line up tomorrow morning, 6 o'clock. The legend that is Mike Graham here with Morning Glory, the breakfast show, 6 till 10. Julia, sounding amazing from 10. And Ian Collins, the housewives' choice from 1. And then you have to deal with me again. What is it, 23 minutes to 7 o'clock? 23 minutes away from the man with the biggest audience. Not the biggest ego, the biggest audience. Kevin O'Sullivan is here. He's on the radio, he's on the television, he's on connected devices. If you go to your toilet and you're under a bit of toilet paper, his face will probably be on that. He's bloody everywhere, Kev O'Sullivan. He's on this station at 7 o'clock. Is that all right? That make you feel better? 0344 419 1000. So many of you getting so wound up about so many things today. Delighted. My next guest is head of campaign. I don't even know what this means. Head of campaigns at Popular Conservatism, Andrew Allison. A very good afternoon, evening, whatever to you, sir. How are you?
Good evening, Jeremy.
What does head of campaigns at Popular Conservatism? Is that a paid role, my friend?
Of course, it's a paid role.
What does it mean?
Yes, I mean, we have various campaigns. We campaign for a restoration, a Great Repeal Act. Actually, the Equality Act, which we're going to be discussing tonight with the fire service.
Good.
The various campaigns that we have, and I'm in charge of it.
Good man. So you're very, very important. Do you want to offer me a job?
Maybe discuss that off air. I think.
Great, so that was a no. Right, so let's start. Let's start with this, because I mean, you know, when we do stories like this, people think that we've made this up. Britain's fire service, this is a report today, Andrew, that was commissioned by the National Fire Chiefs Council, found that the fire service was essentially institutionally racist, misogynistic and homophobic. It said that firemen, I would say fire people, because that would be wrong, in Britain were not diverse enough because the service's proportion of women and ethnic minorities is less than in wider society. Produced by an advisory group focused on improving diversity, equality and inclusion in the fire service, the report found that 9.3% of firefighters were women and 5.4% belonged to ethnic minorities as of March 2024. Andrew Allison, would I be disrespectful to suggest, as I've said for 2 hours and 40 minutes, that if my bloody house was on fire, I couldn't care a jot what the colour, creed, religion or sexuality of that fire person was? I just want the fire put out. We are wasting our money and this country is going down the Swanee.
Jeremy, the authors of this report are obviously not interested when their house is burning down, if they're in danger inside, if all their possessions are about to go up in smoke. They don't appear interested. The only thing they're interested in is the diversity of the firefighters. And that really sums it up. But as I mentioned when we were talking about a minute ago, you know, this is all to do with the Equality Act. That was sort of Gordon Brown's last piece of revenge in 2010, where you got all these different protective characteristics. It spawned the DEI industry. The only people that really like it are those people in that industry and lefty lawyers that make a lot of money out of it. Businesses are frightened of getting on the wrong side of that particular act. But of course, large corporations and the public sector tend to go a little bit over the top on this.
Let me just stop you there. And you're talking about the Equality Act, the Gordon Brown in 2010. It was his last dying act, not dying, you know what I'm saying? So why didn't the Tories have the balls in the last 14 years to throw it out?
That's a very good question. I wish they had. I wish they got rid of a lot of other pieces of Blair-era legislation. But David Cameron, of course, will use the excuse that he couldn't because he was in a coalition with Nick Clegg. That would be his initial excuse. Of course, Nick Clegg used to use the excuse that he couldn't do things because he was in a coalition with David Cameron, and the two used to play off their MPs like that. But there were plenty of other opportunities where that could have happened.
Why did Boris Johnson not throw it out? Why didn't Theresa May throw it out? Why didn't Rishi Sunak throw it out?
Say that her old premiership was consumed with Brexit, which is probably true.
It is interesting, though, isn't it? That and I'm really glad we're having this chat, because I get called by my kids, you're old, you're a dinosaur, you don't understand, Dad. You've got to understand that, you know, we need to be fairer and more this. I'm all for that. But nobody of a younger generation or this persuasion answers this question. I'd love to put it to you. I'm sure there have been many instances before the Equality Act where certain religions, creeds, colours, whatever, sexualities have not been given the same opportunity. But would it not be fair to say that with this Equality Act and with what we see almost on a daily basis, Andrew, that we have gone so far the other way that it is now detrimental and seems to be supported that anybody, and I don't even know how to put it without getting into trouble. I'm telling you, the head of a very important television group said to me 6 months ago, if you're white, middle class and 25, you're stuffed for the next 10 years.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me.
And I'm not trying to be outrageous by saying that. I'm just being honest.
Because the Equality Act pushed us where we are now, because it was an amalgamation of lots of other acts, like the Equal Pay Act, Race Relations Act, Disability, all of those different acts. But it created all these different protected characteristics. I seem to remember a ruling back in 2020, and you'll like this, Jeremy. Well, you won't. That ethical veganism was seen as ethical veganism, yes, a protected characteristic.
What does that mean?
Because if you're a true vegan, you're very ethical with it.
Don't eat meat, but don't expect me to do the same. What does that mean, ethical? What about ethical freezing of pensioners to death? What about ethical we can't see a doctor? What about ethical you can be burgled and mugged and there's no police on the streets? Why, in your mind, Andrew Allison, are those things in a democracy, in a country that is struggling, why are they not given now the same priority as these, words?
They should be, of course they should be, and that's exactly what the voters want, and that's why the voters are despairing. And you are correct. I mean, the Conservatives have 14 years to try and reverse at least some of this Brown legislation, and didn't. But we're left with this. Every which way you turn, we have regular webinars with prominent people, and Jacob Rees-Mogg did one for us just before Christmas. And he said that basically the Conservatives were trying to drive a train on tracks led by Tony Blair. And of course, those tracks don't go to the right, they go to the left. And unless you actually repeal this
I like Jacob Rees-Mogg, but they had 14 years to do something about the blob, to do something about defence spending, to do something about the NHS, and to do something about free speech, because it's a joke.
Yes, no, you're absolutely correct. You've got to get no argument from me on that whatsoever. They did. And the big failure was that legislation, various pieces of legislation from the Blair and Brown eras were not removed from the statute book. And therefore they were hamstrung all the time, every time they wanted to do it. But you can't do that, Minister, because the Equality Act, the Human Rights Act, the Climate Change Act, you do everything.
I'm probably really naive, Andrew, and I'm probably past my sell-by date, but you said something very interesting, which is the DEI industry was spawned by this rubbish. I believe, however much I sound like my dad increasingly, I believe that the British people, in their millions, have had enough of what they see as wrong priorities, wrong choices, really. And I believe that this country, and I'm not, by the way, when I mentioned Trump, totally flawed, many bad characteristics, but I keep going back to this call I took in November from somebody who said, can you imagine if somebody stood up in this country and said, right, tell you what I'm going to do, I'm going to make you better off, I'm going to make you safer, I'm going to make you proud of your country, I'm going to do something about immigration, which is destroying public services, and I'm going to look after the elderly. You'd vote for them, wouldn't you? Of course.
Yeah, of course you would.
I would love there to be a politician who would not say to me, yeah, I know, but the blob. I'd sack the bloody blob on day one. I'd cancel the licence fee for the BBC on day one. There is so many things, and I believe this country is. A lot of people want that, and I think the politicians need to listen far more than they are, because I think the British people. This story today can seem quite frivolous and light-hearted, but the fire service is too white and too male. You'd know this, just go up and down any street in the United Kingdom and ask them that question, they'll go, no, I want the fire put out, Jez. That's what I want.
Well, of course they do, but they also want big strapping blokes. They're not bothered whether they're gay or whether they're straight. They just want big strapping blokes who can actually rescue them. And it's a very physical, hard, tough job.
So you're being sexist now towards women, yeah?
Well, of course, but I'm sure that there are women who can do it, but I would imagine that it tends to be more of a male occupation. And that's just a fact of life, to do with sheer physical strength.
It's a really interesting one. What other work I mean, do you spend your entire time fighting this stuff?
Well, some of this stuff, yeah. I mean, we believe that there should be a Great Repeal Act. There should be a restoration. We should get rid of these Blair reforms. We should leave the European Convention on Human Rights, scrap the Human Rights Act, get rid of the net zero targets. All of these things that we believe in, and we believe, and that's hence the title of the movement, Jeremy, popular conservatism. These are popular conservative policies. They're not socialist policies. They're conservative policies, and they'd be popular if they were enacted by the Conservative Party, and that's what we're trying to change.
I fear the Conservative Party is too centrist, my friend. It's great to have you on. Andrew Allison, head of campaigns at Popular Conservatism, 13 minutes to 7 o'clock. 13 minutes away from the legend that is Kev O'Sullivan. He's here next on Talk.
You know, Europe is still completely beholden to Vladimir Putin for Russian gas. And we import an awful lot of our gas because we don't produce enough ourselves anymore because of net zero. And now a possible future source of it, and a source which has meant that, you know, gas is, you know, really cheap comparatively in America because of their fracking. We're about to literally fill those wells up with concrete and make them unusable. What on earth are they thinking?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Friends, 10 to 7. This is JK and Drive for 10 more minutes. Kev O'Sullivan here from 7 o'clock, and the amazing Petri Hoskins here from 10 o'clock tonight. That's how we line up. Hello to Mark in Preston. He says, Jez, get someone from the BBC on and see what they have to say. We believe the BBC licensing fee should be scrapped. The BBC won't talk to people like us because we're far too below them, for goodness sake. What are you talking about? Mick M. Really? No, Mick M. How much sense does Chris Parry say? Talks common sense. He should be in government. Couldn't agree more. Hello to Nikki. In my cynical mind. This is quite funny, Ryan. I want you to laugh. If Ryan laughs, it's funny. This is from Nikki. In my cynical mind, is the fire service report a smoke screen? See what I did there, Ryan? So they can justify spending thousands of pounds on diversity. Nick in Kent, you like? He's not laughing at all. He's still got a hangover. This is Nikki. Hello to Nikki. Hello to Laura Donovan. I do not give a flying fig who turns up to put out the fire or save my family, providing they can do the job successfully, be it white, black, man or woman, straight or gay. Sod stupid diversity. What is happening to this country? Hello to Matt. Bravo, Chris Parry gets it. Finally a commentator or an expert who actually sees the global picture and understands what Donald Trump is trying to do. Literally the only person I've heard to speak on this that actually gets the point. Well done, Matt. Listen, Chris Parry's doing very, very well. 9 minutes to get your call in if you want to be on 0344 499 1000. We'll go to Cambridge. Oh, nice. Bob, a very good evening. You're on Talk Drive. How are you?
Yes, hi, Jeremy.
Quite possibly one of the most attractive cities in this country, Cambridge.
It's beautiful. It's absolutely stunning. It really is. I love it.
I want to try and guess what you're going to talk about. Bob in Cambridge, what you got?
It's the discrimination in the fire service. First of all, I'll be brief. To sort of counter these claims of discrimination, but I know for a fact this is fact. What they're doing, they have a graduate scheme in place for a start,
yes.
And they're recruiting female senior fire officers who will go out on an appliance to an emergency call, having had no experience on the ground, as it were, in charge of firefighters who are far more experienced. This is one thing that they're doing. They're graduates.
Sorry, can we just rewind? So the fire service is running a graduate scheme whereby it allows people who get onto that scheme to go out on a vehicle with experienced firefighters and wear the white hat and be in charge.
Absolutely.
And who's made that stupid decision?
I think it's actually the commissioners, the various commissioners from the services. It's been wheeled out at a number of the stations, a number of the counties.
Why? Why?
It's to counter this discrimination thing. It's.
Have you been in the fire service?
No, I haven't. Without going too much into detail, I'm involved in some cases with some firefighters in tribunals at the moment.
Okay. Do you believe that it's pretty symptomatic of what's happening across this country, as I do? This rubbish.
It's absolute rubbish. It's absolute rubbish. It's very symptomatic, absolutely. But the bigger story, what they're also doing. This is certainly in the public interest. My point of the call is really there are far more serious issues to be concerned with about rather than this hoax sort of claims of discrimination or what have you. For example, fire appliances that should be going out fully manned with fully qualified firefighters, a crew of 5 are going out with crews of 3. This is official. You can check up on this. They're going out with crews of 3, underqualified, some of them without even first aid.
Wow.
And they're doing this because of the cuts and the budgetary cuts.
And I wonder, by the way, before the people that jump up and say, oh, it's the government that aren't giving us enough money, I wonder how much of these fire services are spending money on diversity roles and bloody projects to say that the fire service is diverse.
Absolutely, but it's worse than that, Jeremy. It's worse than that. There is fraudulent activity going on within the fire service where public funds, fire service funds, are getting diverted for private.
Well, listen, I can't vouch for that, but you certainly highlight the problems. I really appreciate your call. Bob's in Cambridge. Final call of the day. We're going to St Andrews, the greatest golf course in the land. David is a new caller to Talk Drive. 2 minutes. What you got, Dave?
So, when it comes down to this whole, well, I call it the United States of Brussels, and the best thing is now that we've left it, because I think...
Have we?
That well, in a sense, but when we talk about what people perceive as obviously bad-mouthing other people, etc., etc.
Discrimination, yeah.
Discrimination. If you're a fireman or a serviceman, which I was for 24 years, or even a nurse or a doctor or whatever, you will deal with all sorts of catastrophic traumas throughout your day, week, month, years doing that job, okay? And sometimes people overhear conversations between individuals that are actually, it's banter. And there's no discrimination at all.
Do you know why I'm really glad to put you on? Because without going into details, I was doing a documentary once for ITV, and it was about, I was with the fire service. In fact, I was with the ambulance service, and there was I'm going to say black humour. Somebody would jump up and down, but there was during the 2-day shoot. But when I saw, I laughed anyway, but when I saw what they had to deal with, when you understand, as you quite rightly say, the trauma, the effect that could possibly have, no bloody wonder there is that. And if that is going to result in people being told or cautioned, then that's a terrible thing. David, thank you. There is going to be one more caller. We're going to West Yorkshire. Jane, you're on Talk Drive. A very good evening to you. How are you?
Well, thank you very much. I've got 2 things to say to you. First of all, my daughter came to see you a few years ago. She said you were one of the nicest people that she'd ever met.
Sorry, darling, I didn't hear that at all again. What did you say?
Oh, don't worry. I was just, all my friends always say we end on a light note. So do you remember Trumpton?
Trumpton Fire Station, yes. Hugh, Pugh, Barney McGrew, Cuthbert, Dibble and Grub. Where did that come from, for Christ's sake?
Exactly. How did you... Because you've been talking about firemen and nobody cared in those days.
No, that's true. Hugh, Pugh. So Hugh was a bloke, Pugh was Irish, Welsh. Barney McGrew, he might have been Scottish. Barney could have been Irish. Cuthbert, he could have been a posh boy. Dibble, he could have been stupid. He could have dribbled. And Cuthbert Gibble... Do you know what? Grub, he was obviously eating a lot and was fat. Oh, he might have taken a fat jab.
I always think you should end on a light note.
Do you think the world's gone mad, Jane, in West Yorkshire?
I feel the world's gone mad.